Alrighty, so this is going to be the full comprehensive guide to appointment setting in 2026. And as a heads up, in this video, I'm only going to speak about everything you need to know to go from zero to hero in a scale on the realm of appointment setting. So this is for you who maybe has no clue what setting is, probably never heard of it, or maybe you have heard of it, maybe you do have some experience or you have done it before, but you feel like there's a lot more out there that you could learn about and that you could benefit from. So if that's you, then this video is for you pretty much. I will say though, I will talk about everything you need to know about appointment setting, but I'm not going to cover a lot of topics around job applications or how to become the best setter on the team. I'm mainly going to go about the first foundation, which is actually learning the skill. Otherwise, this video would be way too long if I try to include, job application strategies and that kind of stuff here. That's probably going to be a different video. I'll most likely have a different full guide set aside for that. So keep in mind that this full guide is going to be specifically towards learning the skill itself of appointment setting, everything you actually need to know to be able to land a job and make a few $1,000s a month on your own from this. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first thing I want to speak about is my actual story. If you're new to the channel, maybe you haven't watched any of my videos before. For some context, basically beginning of 2024, I moved out of Venezuela, which was my home country, and I came to Spain with less than $1,000 in my bank account. When I came here, I started working at a factory illegally, and then I started working at a bar as well. And so I was making less than minimum wage because I was working illegally, so of course I'd be getting paid less than the minimum salary. So I'd be doing that, making like less than what I needed to actually live a good life. Like I just had enough money to basically pay rent and living expenses, and every month felt like I was just working to afford the next month. It just felt like it was a never ending cycle where I just couldn't break out of, because again, I was working so I could afford a living, so I can pay expenses so that I can work again and pay more expenses, right? It's that same sort of cycle that a lot of people get stuck in. So I was in that for a few months before I landed an appointment setting role. This was my first appointment setting role of 2024. Keep in mind, I had done appointment setting and like online business before this point, but I took a pause from it for reasons that I spoke about in a different video. So without blabbing too much about that, August 2024 was when I landed my first appointment setting role that was actually profitable for me, or that was actually like good and not a scam. To be fair, the other ones that I did before weren't either a scam either, but this was like the actual good one that took off for me. So I landed that role, did that for about a year and a half. I was making about, 2K to 6K plus euros a month, eventually became a seller manager, closer, blah, 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 then went on to start my own business. Now, for some results, I'm sure you might be wondering, like, hey, I'm just talking the talk, or have I actually like done this before? So this is just screenshots of actual proof of payments. This is me in Japan with my friend. This was basically the thing that funded the Japan trip for me, which for me was a lifelong childhood dream, which I was finally able to make happen because of this one remote skill, right? So when I say that appointment setting is the best way to start making money online, I genuinely stand by that. And I mean, I always tell myself, if there's ever a situation where I need to go back to a job, I always know that I have this in my back pocket. Well, at this point, I can do closing because I've kind of been able to do that before. But if I didn't have the skill of how to get closing, I'd always go back to setting, which takes less time to learn than closing and less experience. Anyways, if you also want to see more sort of testimonial videos or more results, I pretty much post everything on my Instagram page. So just make sure to check that out if you're still hesitant about me. Now, that being said, let's get into the actual sauce. What even is appointment setting? So to keep it simple, appointment setting is the skill of information gathering, qualifying, and persuading a prospect to book or to dedicate some of their time to schedule a meeting or to have a meeting with a sales person. So what this might look like, because appointment setting, by the way, even though it's a role that you can do like remotely, the concept of appointment setting applies in many other areas of life. Some may be stuff like with doctors and nurses. Like, let me give you an example. Imagine you go to a hospital. You don't just go straight to the doctor right away. You get triaged by a nurse, right? That nurse will get to understand what is your pain, what's your problem. Are you having back pain? How long have you had that for? Tell me about it. What have you tried to solve it? Have you been taking any medication? Do you have any allergies? They pretty much run this entire discovery process on you before and that's of course to qualify you or to figure out like what your diagnosis or what like they think the problem might be, and then based off of that, they'll put you on with the correct doctor. May that be a cardiologist or like a back doctor or like a gut health kind of doctor, that kind of stuff. So they'll basically point you in the best direction based on that triage they'll run on you. And another example of this would be like in volleyball. In volleyball, you have the setters, and then you have the actual strikers who hit the ball down. And the way that this works is like I don't know if you've seen clips of volleyball before, but you might have the setter, which is like the one that places a shot, and then you have the striker who like jumps and hits it down. You're basically doing the exact same thing here. You are like the bridge or the middleman between a lead or somebody interested in the company's product or service you're the bridge between the prospect and the salesperson, right? So to the salesperson, you're like that setter in volleyball who's setting up the shot for them. And the best part about it is you don't need to know how to score the shot, which is a harder part. You just need to know how to convince people to dedicate 30 minutes or an hour of their time to meet with somebody who can then land the shot, or in this case, land the deal. Now, that's not to say that appointment setting is necessarily easy or it's something that you can like get rich quick with doing, but it definitely is way faster and it requires way less time than some other things out there. So just as a heads up, like nothing, if somebody's telling you like you can get rich quick with certain things, that's not the case. Like a lot of it just comes down to, basically it comes down to who you are, but it's a whole separate discussion. However, I do believe, it's literally a fact that you can get not rich quick, but you can make at least some money online with this relatively quickly, right? I'm not promising 10K a month, but 2 to 6K a month as an appointment setter to start with is very realistic. Now, another example would be with an info product. Imagine you are working with a fitness coach, and that fitness coach has a lot of people who are following him to learn about how to gain 10 kg of muscle, or how to gain muscle. Let's just put it that way. So to that coach, they have, like I said, they have this large following of people who might be interested or who are leads to him because they've seen his content, maybe they know about him, or maybe they're just interested in gaining more muscle. And so you as the appointment setter, you would be the one connecting those leads to the coach so that the coach can then sell his product or his service. Or maybe the coach has other salespeople, so that you would then connect these leads interested in fitness or gaining muscle with the salesperson of that coach. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure you get the gist by now, but another example is like in the marketing space. You know, if you're working for a marketing company and that marketing company is running ads, if, let's say, a real estate agent fills out an advertisement requesting more information from the marketing company, the appointment setter will be typically the one to reach out, qualify the lead, ask them questions, and then consult them, as well as book them in with the right salesperson from the marketing company itself. So those are some examples of appointment setting. I hope that by this point you know what this is. Now, why appointment setting? I know I've kind of touched on this before, so let me just kind of reiterate on this. First thing is that it's an AI-proof career path. First of all, because it's very, very human intensive. It's like a lot of appointment setting is literally just sales. And the last thing that I believe AI is going to replace is human communication and sales, especially in high ticket services or products where, you know, before people are going to invest $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, they don't want to speak to an AI knowing that they have such a huge investment to make. Some people will be okay with that, but to businesses, the risk of losing somebody is way higher with AI than it would be with a regular salesperson. So of course, to them, it's a no-brainer to have a human on the phone to actually convert those people properly and make sure that they're getting properly converted. And so another thing I want to say, by the way, because I know, you know, nowadays we even got stuff like AI sort of appointment setters and phone triagers. The thing about these AI appointment setters and AI companies as a whole, by the way, the funny part is they hire human salespeople or human appointment setters. Like I was literally in an interview the other day with a company who they use appointment setters, and keep in mind that most of their business model is around like implementing AI to streamline business operations. And they still needed appointment setters for their business. It's like, what does that tell you about it? You know, how if a business that operates on automating business operations with AI are still using human setters, what does that tell you about the current state of the market with AI versus human setters? So let that land. Now, I do think at one point maybe AI is going to replace all of us, to be fair, but I mean, that time is on right now, so why worry about that? Next thing is like you get flexible hours and income. I always say with appointment setting, like, hey, if you can hit your quota, if you can hit your outcome, nobody's gonna be up your bum about how you're spending every minute of your time, right? So that can go sideways, because either you're really good at it and you hit your results in like 3-4 hours and the rest of the day is yours, or you can just be really shitty at it. 12 hours go by and you just don't get anything, and you're just not getting anywhere, right? Same thing with income. It's very commission heavy. You still do get a lot of times a salary, but the fact that you get commissions makes it so that you don't really have a set cap on your income. Next thing is like work from anywhere. Of course, you're just mainly doing phone calls. All you need is a laptop and your phone, and that's it. Next thing is that you don't need any previous experience. This is a huge one. You know, nowadays the catch-22 of the labor market is you need experience to land a job, but then to land a job you need experience. The good thing about this is that people don't look for experience as much as they look for character traits. Last but not least, it's always in high demand. You can always find setting jobs out there. You know, markets that are higher for setters are always growing, and you know, like you can find a setter job in a real estate market. You can find a setter job in a marketing company, info product business, with a chiropractor. Like, there's never a shortage of salespeople that can be there. There's never a shortage of demand of salespeople out there in the world, much less appointment setters. appointment setters are still a form of salespeople, by the way. Now, the to go into the income breakdown, you have three types of ways that you get paid. The first way is commissions only. So when you get paid on commissions only, let me see if I can draw here. When you get paid on commissions only, you are taking most of the risk. So the risk is way higher, right? But then because the risk is way higher, you also get a big portion of the upside, meaning you get a big portion of whatever extra money the company generates. So commission only roles tend to be the ones that, when chosen correctly, you can make the most money with. But the problem with this is that you got a lot of scam companies out there, or people who are starting out who don't really have a proven process, who want commission only appointment setters just to use them as their guinea pigs. Like they want to use you, who is working in commission only, as their way of testing their proof of concept for the product or the service, right? Without having any sort of data whatsoever. So even though commission-based roles are very lucrative at times, at the same time, if you're doing it with the wrong company, it can definitely bite you in the bum. And for beginners, I do not recommend commission only, especially unless it's like a very well-known company that has proven results. And I would say try to avoid commission only at the beginning. Now, the second type of payment, or not payment, but like second type of work in which you can work as an appointment setter, is getting a base salary plus commissions. So in this case, it's kind of like you're still getting some of the upside, not as much as here, but you're still you're getting some of the upside, like not as much, but still some upside, right? But the good thing is that, well, the risk is way lower because of the fact that you have a base salary. So if you're, for example, like worrying about how you're gonna pay your rent next month, and like say you live abroad in Bali or something, the good thing about this is you don't really have to worry too much, because you're always gonna have like, I don't know, 1K to 2K always coming in no matter what. And then the rest of the money is just going to be commissions. Now, of course, if you're just shit at what you do and you're not getting results and you're getting paid a 1K to 2K base salary, you're probably going to get fired because you're not making the company money back. But in most cases where you actually know what you're doing, you can still get commissions on top of that. And then that's where you can get it to like the 4K, 5K, 6K plus OTE. OTE, by the way, means on target earnings. So typically, you can get $1,000 to $3,000 in the base. Again, that pretty much negates a lot of the risk on your end. And then you still get some upside in terms of commissions. And in this case, where you're doing base plus commissions, you tend to get like a 4%, maybe 5% commission, depending on the deal size. This is if we're talking about high ticket. Now, the last sort of payment model is base/fixed rate only. This is, in my opinion, the worst one. I would not really go for this one, and I would not advise anybody to do this unless they're really desperate and they need some money ASAP. The bad thing about this is, I mean, look, the good thing is, of course, like you're getting paid a salary, so they might pay you like 3K a month, 2K a month, maybe 4K. I haven't seen that yet. The bad thing is that they never, like you as a salesperson, won't have your incentives aligned with the companies. And if somebody's just offering you a fixed rate, you have no incentive to perform for them. So a lot of them don't even offer this. But some of them, what they might do is they pay you a per appointment fee. And this could work in theory, like depending on, but like there's so many, like on the company side, for them to offer a per appointment sort of offer, there's so many things that could go wrong. Like you could just book appointments for the sake of booking them. You can book bad appointments, etc. And even when they do offer per appointment sort of payments, like it's like $10, maybe $20 per appointment. It's like very, very little amounts. And a lot of them they really pay you just per appointment. They pay you per showed appointment that was qualified. So that's a whole layer of qualification behind that. So, if it is pay per appointment, and let's say they're paying you like, I don't know, $30 to $50 per appointment, it could be justified depending on what they're looking for. But honestly, from what I've seen, especially when you're starting out, nothing beats base plus commissions. This is the best one. Because again, when you get a commission from deals that close, you naturally get more money than what you would get per appointment, if that makes sense. So let's get into the actual income brackets. For beginners, you're expecting to make anywhere from 1 to 3K a month. Intermediate, 3 to 6K a month. Advanced is like 6K plus. And I do want to say something, which is that these are generalized values. Your vehicle matters just as much as your skill in determining your earning potential. What does that mean? The best way to explain this is with an analogy. So riddle me this. Imagine you have two miners. You have two miners. One of them is a great gold miner. Like their expertise, and they've got years of experience in mining out gold. And then you've got a miner who doesn't have that much experience in gold mining, but maybe has mined like some iron or some other sort of ore in the past, right? Now imagine you put the experienced gold miner in a dirt mine. That miner is probably not going to get as much gold. They might get a little bit or not at all, right? Now, if you place the other miner, the less experienced gold miner, in a gold mine, that miner is in turn going to get way more gold than the more experienced gold miner in a shit mine or in a dirt mine, right? So the same thing applies here. Like, you could be a super advanced appointment setter. You could have like all the trainings in the world. You could have all the frameworks, all the theory, all the execution. But then if you're in a shitty offer, or you're in an offer that limits you, right, that you can't really make a lot of money with, you're going to be making the money that maybe an intermediate or a beginner is going to make. And likewise, you could be a beginner, but then you can also make advanced income, right? Because like, you just got a really good sort of offer, and that is very high leverage. And so that's why like 50% of this is actually knowing appointment setting and learning the skill. But the other huge portion of it is making sure that you're picking the right offers and that you're picking the right vehicle, so that you're not in a position where you know a lot, where you're doing really good, but then your income is capped not by your skill set, but by your job, right? By your opportunity, by your offer. So we'll have a different full guide on actually applying to jobs and how to go about that. But for now, like I said, this one's going to be primarily on the skill of appointment setting. Now, different types of appointment setting. We have a few different categories, right? The first one is phone setting versus DM setting. Very self-explanatory. In one of them, you're doing phone calls. Another one, you're doing DM setting. Now, personally, I am a much bigger fan of phone setting, primarily because it's higher paced and everything takes place in like one conversation, versus DM setting, where you might text somebody, then they get back to you in like 4 hours, and you have to wait for them to respond. And of course, like, there's exceptions here and there, but I'm just generalizing. Overall, I found that phone appointment setting tends to be superior, just simply because of the fact that less people are willing to do it, right? So there's less people in, so less demand. This is supposed to say people, by the way, just excuse my handwriting. So basically, overall, I mean, not less demand, sorry, there's less supply, because less people are willing to do phone setting because it's scarier, it's more difficult, it's more like high risk, you have to like think on the spot, more high pressure, whatever you want to call it, right? DM setting tends to be a lot more laid back, relaxed, you kind of just reply when you can and that kind of stuff. But at the same time, the gains seem to be a bit less in some cases. But overall, I just found, I mean, honestly, just choose whatever you want. I just find that for me, phone calling is way more fun and way more engaging than sending DMs. I just find that sending DMs like really fucking burns out my brain when I'm just texting back and forth and not really doing anything else. Anyway, that tangent aside, I'll speak about the different types of like setting, by the way, in a second. Before we get to that, I'm just going to speak about the actual cold versus warm leads and what this means. So cold leads are leads who have never heard of you, right? These are people who have never heard of your product, never heard of your service, and are not expecting your call. So that's why when you say cold calling, you're primarily calling people who have never heard of you, never expected your call, and have no clue who you are. So that tends to be the one that is more challenging. It tends to be it tends to be the one where you call prospects that tend to hang up more often, or tend to get more pissed off because they never solicited your call to begin with. That's the keyword here. There's no solicitation, right, from the prospect's end, so they're not expecting your call, and this is where a lot of the rejection takes place. Now, I will say something about cold calling, which is that because it takes higher skill and because it's more uncomfortable, not as many people can do it, much less do it properly. Now, what I will say is about cold calling is, because companies are not spending money to attract those leads, maybe they do spend some money to source the leads, like maybe find them on Google or something, but very, very low amounts, right? But because these leads cost money so much less money, it costs the company so much less money, when you actually convert them, they make the company so much more money. Because, for example, if you're running ads, right, and I'm going to speak about warm leads in a second, but let's say you're running paid advertisements, those leads would be warm, right? And basically warm leads, what that means, warm leads are leads who they opted in for something, or they are aware of who you are. Because there's two types of warm. There's outbound and there's inbound. So let's just talk about cold and warm. Warm leads are leads who have heard of you, have interacted with some of your content, or are expecting a call from you. That's kind of the general umbrella you can put warm leads under. So let's say, for example, ads. That would be an example of a warm lead. If somebody fills out an ad, that person is already expecting you, right? That's a warm lead. Now, the thing is, the caveat here is that the company has to spend money to run ads, right? And so maybe to get that one lead that came through, they might have spent $30, right? And maybe you need like 10 of these to get one appointment. Very, very bad example, but if it costs you $300 to get one appointment, I don't know how you're making that work. Depends on the company's specific finances. But that means it would cost them $300 to get one appointment. So assuming you get that one appointment and that appointment closes, let's say it makes the company $2,000, you got to keep in mind that they still have to subtract the $300 that they had to put into advertising. Meanwhile, when you're cold calling, that expense doesn't tend to be there. So then when you actually convert the lead, it's much more justifiable to pay you more money, or for the company to be more profitable because they're spending less money to get the cold leads, right? So that's kind of the little, downside versus upside kind of thing between those two. But yeah, warm leads, like I said before, these are leads who are expecting you. Maybe they're not expecting you, but they've interacted with you. They're engaged with your content, with some resources of yours, and they may know most likely, who you are. Now back to this thing. The reason I say that is because we have cold outbound. Cold outbound, by the way, outbound means you reach out to somebody, right? You reaching out, you calling somebody, you DMing somebody is outbound. So cold outbound is you DMing or calling somebody who's not expecting your call at all. Never heard of you. Warm outbound, however, is for people who maybe have engaged with your content, have heard of you, but then you're reaching out to them outbound. So you're the one who's reaching out to them. Now, inbound, on the other hand, are people who may have opted in and specifically asked you to reach out to them. Like they reach out to you kind of thing, This could be people who schedule calls with you. These could be people who fill in a form for you to call them. That's an example of inbound, right? These are typically the warmest and the best kinds of leads that you can have. They're the ones that convert the highest, but they're also the most expensive for the company to get. So that's the only downside of inbound. Plus, because of the fact that they're expensive, a company isn't going to want to give inbound leads to an inexperienced appointment setter, because then that setter will basically be losing their advertising dollars, right? So for that reason, what tends to happen is most beginner setters tend to start out with cold outbound or warm outbound. Now, as a beginner, you could still find inbound roles, right? I'm not saying it's impossible, but you gotta definitely prove that you can actually do it. Now, the other thing is there's different types of appointment setting, right? We have SDR versus BDR versus ISA. SDR means sales development representative. These tend to be the B2B sort of setters for inbound leads. I'll explain B2B versus B2C in a minute. Actually, you know what? I'll explain it right now, just for this to make sense. So when it comes to B2B, B2B stands for business to business, meaning that you're a business selling a product or a service to another business. B2C, on the other hand, means business to consumer. So you're a business selling a product or service to a consumer. So B2B examples, so I'm just going to write this right here. B2B might look like a company selling CRM software to another company, right? So like a B2B, basically, they're selling something to a business that they might need. B2B might look like running paid advertisements for a business. B2B might be training a company's team, right? So anything that means that you're selling something to a company is B2B. Now, B2C, on the other hand, B2C is selling to a consumer. So this might mean something like fitness, right? When you sell fitness, you're mainly selling that to a consumer, unless you're selling it to like a company, which I don't know if that's even a thing. Dating is another thing, right? Personal coaching or self-improvement, like all these examples fall under B2C. Now, the key difference is that B2B, because you're dealing with business owners, these tend to be the ones that first of all, they pay more. And by the way, I'm just generalizing here. Like, look, I know a friend, for example, who works in the yachting industry, which is technically B2C because you're dealing with consumers, but then the average sale value is like thousands upon thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. So just because something is B2C doesn't mean you can't make money with it. As a generalization, typically B2B tends to be what actually pays out most of the money, because business owners are the ones who, first of all, they have more money for the business, right? Yeah, oftentimes their companies have budgets set aside to invest in improvements. And then the second thing is it's easier to justify value when selling to B2B. For example, let's say that I am reaching out to a company that is making $100,000 a month, and that company has a problem with their show rate, right? Let's say that their show rate right now is 30%, and they're making $100,000 a month. If I can get the show rate to, let's say, 50%, that company is making an extra, give or take. So they go from 100K, do like a improvement. Just doing math off the top of my head, they're probably doing like at least 150,000 a month, right? If I improve the show rate from 30% to 50%. Actually, is it? Yeah, it's give or take. It's almost double, basically. You get my point. Like, I'm not going to pull up a calculator now. But you can see that if my value to the company, or if my service is worth $50,000 or $75,000 to that company, then it's so much more justifiable for that company to come and pay me, let's say $5,000 or $10,000 to help them solve a problem that is costing them $75,000 a month, for instance, right? Same thing with advertising. If a company doesn't have advertising, you do advertising for them, and they generate an extra $30,000 a month, it's not unreasonable for them to pay you $3,000 a month, as an example, right? Now, and B2C tends to be a bit different, because you're selling to consumers, it's a bit harder to sometimes justify the value of things. Not always. Like sometimes you have like personal coaching, shadow work kind of programs that people sell for like $10,000, $20,000. Like, it can happen, right? If they're selling to ultra high net worth individuals. But generally speaking, when you're selling fitness offers, dating offers, what else could be B2C? Actually, what I sell is B2C as well, which is like teaching people how to do appointment setting. When you sell that, you got to keep in mind that most people you're talking to, depending on the context, are not gonna, in some cases, they're not going to have as much money to spend or to invest as, let's say, a business owner who has a company making tens of thousands a month or hundreds of thousands of dollars, who has a set budget aside, right? Now, that doesn't mean that B2C is worse than B2B, because there's a lot of pros and cons. But the thing about B2C is, even though maybe these guys are, maybe less of them have the money, for example, the good thing is that you have much more volume. So you have a lot more people who, you have a lot more consumers, right, than you have business owners. So by default, you can get more sales in the B2C than you might get with B2B. So B2B, you might have less companies, but then each company might pay you more money, per se, right? Another thing is that B2C tends to be more emotional sales. So when you're selling B2C, you're selling people based on like emotional reasons that for themselves, like that motivate them to buy. Like, for example, if I'm selling somebody an appointment setting, the reason they buy from me is because they hate their current job, they hate being in a cycle that they're in, and they want to build a better life for themselves, and they have all these goals and all these pains and all these dreams. And so that tends to be what creates a sale for me. Now, for a B2B company, it's a lot less emotional and more logical. Like, a business owner isn't going to invest in your service, most likely, because they feel like they're, I don't know, because they're motivated. Actually, that's wrong. In all kinds of sales, you have some form of emotional buy-in, because even business owners, when they want to invest in a service, it's like the reason why they want to make an extra $50,000 a month is so that maybe they can spend more time with their family. So there's always an emotional reason behind it. But then the conversation itself tends to be a lot more logical. It's like you're speaking more about numbers, like how much is the business making, how much are you missing out on by not doing this thing? Okay, that's costing you $10,000 a month. How is that impacting your closers? How much is the closing percent at? Oh, it's at 20%. I see. So if you know, if you get it, if it stays at 20%, do you feel like that's making you lose, I don't know, like $10,000 a month? I wouldn't say. This is not, by the way, like my usual sales script. I'm just rambling right now. But you get my point. It's like B2B is a lot more numbers focused. B2C is a lot more emotion focused. And both, at the end of the day, you like in both sales, you're always selling to somebody always buys something because of an emotion, right? But B2B just tends to be a lot more logical. That's the whole verdict from that. So knowing all that to be true, which one should you go for? I don't think there's a specific type that you should go for at the beginning, like one set type. Genuinely, I think just look for whichever one makes the most sense. Like if there's a B2C offer that genuinely makes more sense for you than a B2B one that is out there, then I'd go for that B2C one as well, right? You know? Now, for me, my personal preference is B2B. I just like speaking more to business owners, but I don't have a problem doing B2C, right? You know, you shouldn't judge an offer based on just if it's B2B or B2C, because a lot of them, like, again, they both have their pros and they both have their cons. You just have to be aware of what you're getting yourself into so that you can ask the right questions to determine if that's the right offer or not. And again, we'll have a different module on sort of offer acquisition, but all you have to know so far is these key differences between B2B and B2C. So back to the main point of what is a SDR. So sales development representative stands for an appointment setter, typically inbound, mostly inbound actually, or warm, who deals with warm leads, sorry. And these are going to be mainly people dealing with B2B, right? These are B2B setters, primarily inbound. BDR tends to be more of the, also B2B, but more for cold calling. So people who do cold calling, you know, they might be referenced as a cold caller or as a BDR. And last but not least, we have ISA, which is inbound, but for B2C. And typically ISAs don't really go as deep in conversations. You know, ISAs tend to be more kind of closer to a customer service agent than an actual salesperson. So sometimes you can have an SDR as well, that's like B2B. And the thing about these definitions, by the way, is that there's no general consensus of which one's which. Like, you could look up on Google and everybody's going to have a different definition of what a BDR or an ISA or an SDR is. I'm just giving you sort of the most consistent explanation that I've found. But then don't be surprised if somebody advertises for an SDR role, but then it's cold calling. You know, like, it does tend to happen. All you have to know is that an appointment setter isn't just called an appointment setter or a cold caller. They can be called many different things, and the main ones are SDR, BDR, ISA. By the way, BDR means business development representative. ISA means inside sales agent. So to backtrack now, let's get into how to actually conduct an appointment setting call. Well, actually, before this, there's the thing about the setting principles that I want to get into before we speak about the call structure. The first thing is that you want to know your script by heart. And if you don't, and I'm sure, you know, if you've been in sales before, maybe you have heard of sales, you must be familiar by now with what a script is. And if you don't, a script is basically like a list of instructions or words that you need to say on a call, right? And an example of a script is with actors. Like actors, they use scripts in their plays to know what to say. Like if you ever watch a movie, well, you probably have watched a movie. When you're watching a movie, you see that actors, like, they don't just improvise what they're saying in the set or in the filming. They usually follow a script, they memorize the script, and then they say it in the film itself, but then they just say it as if like they don't read the script physically. They just memorize it and they say it, and it comes off as it's not even scripted, right? And so when we're in sales, and especially at an appointment setting, we want to have that same mentality where we want to be like actors. Like we want to have a script, but we don't want to be reading that script midway through the conversation. And there's many reasons for that. And it kind of leads into not sounding robotic, which I'll speak about, but you want to know that script by heart. And so, because a mistake that a lot of people tend to make is they read mid call. And when you're reading, it's like, tell me of a conversation that sounds good when one person is reading. Like that doesn't tend to work out very well. And so knowing your script by heart doesn't necessarily mean that, like, first of all, it means you memorize it so well where you could just recite the whole thing with your eyes closed. But at the same time, you don't want to be so rigid or robotic to where you're always saying the exact same words in every single call and every single conversation. Like, you got to keep in mind that the difference between sales and acting is that, actually, this is not a good example, but what I'm trying to get to is that sales or appointment setting is a dialogue. It's not a monologue. So it's not enough for you to just memorize one script and then think that every conversation is going to follow that same framework. That's most of the time not going to happen. What's going to happen is you're going to have a framework or a script that you memorize with all the processes and the steps laid out. But then from call to call, the way that you use that script is going to vary, right? So you might adapt that script or that framework depending on the prospect that you're speaking with. But the general thing that you want to do from the beginning is make sure that you always know your script by heart. Like, you never want to be in a situation where you're reading. And I will speak about being flexible and how to like actually tailor the conversation in a minute, but that's a bit of more of an advanced topic. Now, the second thing is never giving price on a phone call. Now, why is that, Adrian? Let me answer that. The reason why you don't want to give price is when somebody has no idea what you do or how it benefits them or how it ties into their situation, if you give them price, they're not going to see the value behind the price, and they're going to assume that you're just expensive compared to somebody out there in the market. Let's say, for example, imagine you're going out to a dealership to buy a car, and you ask the salesman, hey, I want to buy a black car. How much is it going to cost me? And a salesman is like, hey, that is going to have to, like, I can't just give you a price because there's many different types of black cars, right? You have like Lamborghinis, you have Peugeots, you have Nissans, whatever, BMW. And so imagine a salesperson did give you a price, and you're like, hey, so how much is a black car? And the salesperson is like, oh, a black car is going to cost you $20,000. In your eyes, you might be like, oh no, I'm not going to spend $20,000 on a black car. I can get another black car for $5,000. Why would I do that? But in reality, you don't realize that black car that you're being pitched $20,000 for is actually Lamborghini Aventador that is usually worth $300,000, but then you're getting it at $20,000 price point. So in that example, if you give somebody a price at the call too early, they'll basically see it as, they won't see the value behind it, and they'll only compare it based off of price. Another example of this is, imagine you go out to a doctor and they tell you that you're going to have to, like, maybe you call the hospital and you're like, my back hurts. How much is it going to cost me to fix this? If the nurse had no context and the nurse said, yeah, it's going to cost you $5,000, you might be like, oh, $5,000 for some back pain? That's not worth it at all. Like, I'll just wait out a little bit and it'll go on its own. I'll just go to like a chiropractor to have them massage me or something, right? But then what you don't realize is that perhaps that back pain was maybe some tumor that if you left untreated for another year, maybe you'd lose the ability to walk. And now suddenly the problem has such weight to it that paying $5,000 becomes a no-brainer, because paying $5,000 versus going paralyzed your whole life, like, of course you'd pay the $5,000, right? And so that's the thing, like, when you give price at the beginning of a call without understanding their situation, you're not just doing yourself a disservice because you're losing the client most of the cases, but you're doing them a disservice because they don't know what they're even signing up for, and they're just judging based off of price alone. And this might sound like it's common sense, for people. Like, why would somebody just judge on price alone? But you won't be, like, you'd be surprised to learn how many people just look at the number and they're like, yep, I'm not even going to think about it further. So never give price on a call. Next thing is seek to understand and consult, not sell. When most people, when they get into this, they always, again, back to the topic of the script, they always focus on being very rigid with their process, very rigid with their script. And they get very focused on making sure that they get the appointment or the sale. And what they don't do is because they do that, because they're focusing too much on the script and the words and what they're saying, they stop focusing on the prospect himself. All right, and they stop focusing on what the prospect is saying. They stop being present with the prospect. And when you're not present with the prospect, you can't formulate the next best question or the next best answer. So when you approach a conversation as somebody who's looking to consult, right? When you just say, you know what, I'm not going to try to solve this guy. I just genuinely want to understand if I can help you, so that I can propose the next best step. When you approach a conversation that way, and you just put all your focus and all your attention on the prospect when they're speaking, that's when you can start coming up with the right questions and right responses in the call. Because if you're always thinking about the script and what you're going to say next, like, you can't tailor the conversation to them. But when you're thinking of, how can I help this guy? How can I understand his situation to the point where I know what to propose, or how can I just consult him really well? And you ask your questions, and you say the things that you have to say from that mentality. Suddenly you're like, the things that you ask and that you say make a lot more sense, because you're focused on the prospect, you're focused on them. And I know that was a bit of an abstract example, but I might touch on this later in a bit in the triage section. Then the next part is tonality matters. Tone matters. And when it comes to tone, I could just blab and yap for hours about how to actually have the right tone. All you want to know is, like, there's five main variables to your tonality. The first one is your two of them are constants, and the three are variables. And I think it's like 3 constants and 2 variables. Basically, the first one is your volume. You always want to speak at a loud enough volume to where you're not shouting, but they can also hear you. That's number 1. Number 2 is you want to speak with a good enough cadence. So you're not speaking too fast, you're not speaking too slow, right? That stays a constant. You want to speak in a way that has a good cadence behind it. And the third thing is comprehension. You want to articulation. You want to articulate your words in a way that can be understood. Because if you're speaking, right, and the prospect can't understand what's coming out of your mouth, it doesn't matter what you say. You want to make sure that you're pronouncing every word appropriately, even if that means you have to slow down a little bit. Now, those are the 3 constants. The 2 things that actually change in your tonality tend to be, number 1, your frequency. Like, sometimes I speak higher, sometimes I speak lower. Like, I vary my frequency. And how you vary your frequency very much depends on the context of the conversation. I'll explain what that means in a bit. But then the other thing as well that is a variable, aside from your frequency, is your pauses. How often you pause when you're saying something. Like, I might just speak very fast, or I might say something, pause a little bit, and say something else. And typically when you do a pause, it makes a prospect either, number 1, like, focus on what you just said, or number 2, it signals to them that it's their turn to speak. So if I say something like, yeah, so how's your day been? It's like that pause signals the other person to speak, right? Now, the main thing about tonality that you have to know is, at the beginning, don't overthink it too much. Just keep in mind these variables that I mentioned, but then also think of it as, like, for me, what has served me the most in terms of tonality is genuinely just meaning the words that you say. Because I can bet you that if I record a conversation between you and your friend, you probably have, like, such a good tonality. If you're just messing around, you're making jokes, and you're not really overthinking. What I find is that when people are just so in their head, like reading the script mid-call, or they're thinking of what to say, or they're like when they're on a sales call or a phone call, their entire tonality shifts and becomes so monotone and robotic because they're just anxious. They're in their head and they're reading the whole time. And so, honestly, my best advice when it comes to tonality is just mean what you say. Have oomph behind the words that you're saying. It's like, right now, I'm not autistically thinking about what tonality to make. I just make whatever tones comes to me in the moment, because first of all, I'm present, and second of all, I am meaning what I say. And the third thing, by the way, is body language. Like, you'll see, I'll speak with a certain body language, and that in turn creates my tonality. Like, it helps me create a tone. So, like, again, if you analyze yourself in a conversation with a friend, you'll see that you actually do use tonality, but then on a phone call, because you start overthinking and because you get too much in your head, you just stop using the right tone. And again, so the 3 things for tonality primarily, number 1 is being present, number 2 is meaning what you say, and number 3 is actually using your body to convey a certain tonality. And but this is more of an advanced thing, but something that also helps me is watching people who speak the way that I want to be speaking, and then just mimicking their form of speech. So that's another thing, which a lot of your tonality is learned from seeing other people speak and mimicking them. Right now, the next point is know when not to ask certain questions. And we'll speak about what kind of questions you should ask and what you shouldn't ask. But what I see happens a lot of the times is people will ask dumb questions that lose them the whole sale or that lose them the whole appointment. It's like they might ask somebody, yeah, so tell me what got you onto this call with me today, or what made you want to apply on our ad. And then the prospect might be like, oh yeah, I just needed a way of landing a new job. I just don't like my current job. And the seller might ask, oh well, how's that impacting you at the moment? It's like that question might be on the script. That's a question that maybe other people advocate for, but in that context, it was a horrible question to ask. And so the prospect is a bit taken back, like, what do you mean? How's that impacted me? Like, I just don't like my job, you know? It's like, it can go sideways very quickly. At the same time, sometimes you might have conversations where you can go a bit deeper, and oftentimes you'll also be dealing with prospects who are very dry, very, like not happy to have a conversation. And for those, if you treat those prospects the same way that you would treat an open prospect, it might turn south very quickly, because some of these prospects, they don't want to be answering questions, they don't want to be engaging with you, they don't give a fuck about you, they just want to get to know what you do and how much it costs. And so when you ask them too many questions, or when you don't know when to ask something, when you're not to ask something, you end up sometimes butchering or shooting yourself in the foot in the stage of the setting call. So knowing when not to ask something, and knowing when to skip over certain parts, is as much of a skill as knowing when to ask certain things and in what context to do so. The next thing is make sure you don't sound robotic. This goes back to knowing your script by heart, but sounding robotic happens primarily because you're focused on what you're saying. You're not focused on what you're saying. You're focusing on what to say, right? Again, it goes back to tonality. You don't really have the oomph behind the words. You don't mean what you say. You're not using body language, and you're speaking the same sort of robotic tone without varying anything, and just speaking the same overtone over and over and over again. Kind of like what I'm doing right now. It's like, you see what I'm getting at, right? So sounding robotic is just about genuinely just knowing what to say, honestly. So knowing your script so well that you just know what to say, and just genuinely being present and focusing on the prospect, like treating it like a conversation, right? Not being nervous and anxious and over in your head about it. The next thing is speed to lead is king. And look, if there's one thing that I can attribute to so much of the money that I've made as a setter, is being able to get to the leads so fast that I'm always the one getting the appointment first over everybody else in the team. And we can have a separate discussion to a whole different day of how to maximize your speed to lead or what to do. But there's been studies that show that if you contact a prospect within 5 minutes of them, let's say, applying to a form, their response rate and their conversion rate is 100 times higher than if you were to call them or message them 10 minutes, half an hour later or more. So there's been studies to prove that the faster that you contact a lead that is interested, the more likely you are to convert them. So huge principle right there. You always want to find ways to optimize for speed to lead. And if there's one 80-20 for companies that do inbound, is always focus on the speed to lead, because I'll tell you from experience, I used to be in the team of 8+ setters. What I'd do is I'd have a system in place so that whenever a new lead came in, I was always the first one to get to that lead. And so people would always get pissed at me because they think that I had an AI or something marking or getting the leads from me. Because in reality, whenever I would get to the lead first before all of them, those would be the warmest kinds of leads, and those would be the highest converting ones. So while somebody might spend 6 or 8 hours a day just cold calling, it's I just do a single phone call and I get my appointment for that day, right? Well, in this case, we needed more appointments than just one, but you get my point. It's if you get 4 or 5 warm leads a day inbound, and then you get 3 of them and you get them booked, it's that you've already done your day's work in an hour, So a lot of the leverage really comes in speed to lead. The other thing is double tapping leads, and I don't mean double tap in the context of shooting them, right? What I mean is double dialing. So if you dial somebody one time, this is mainly applicable to cold calling, or to not cold calling, sorry, but to the phone dials instead of DMing. If you dial somebody one time, if they have do not disturb enabled, or they have some form of scam filter or spam filter, your call's not going to go through most of the times. However, when you double dial, so meaning that as soon as the call hangs up and you dial again in a quick succession, that actually allows you to a lot of the times bypass these spam filters or the do not disturb, and just overall get a way higher pickup rate. So I always say unless a prospect explicitly told you not to do that, make sure you always double tap the lead. But that was quite a bit. That was pretty much those kind of the main setting principles that you want to know starting out. That's a high level. The next thing we're going to speak about is the actual call structure itself. Here's the actual how-to and what to say in the middle of a call. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first thing is the opening and the frame. So there's actually 4 parts to a setting call. There's the opening and the frame. We have the triage, the mini pitch, and then the booking the meeting and the next steps. Opening and frame, basically what you do is, very simply, when somebody answers the phone, there's 2 questions that are on their mind. Number 1, who are you? Number two, why are you calling them? Oftentimes when you're cold calling, by the way, when it's cold outbound, they just want to know why you're calling. They don't really give a crap about who you are. But if you're dealing with like inbound or warm leads, sometimes it's useful to mention who you are so that they remember. So then, an example of this might be like, I'll show you mine for instance. Hey, this is Adrian. I saw that you clicked on one of my ads about becoming a remote appointment setter. Does that ring a bell? Cool. So like that right there is an example of an introduction or an opening. And look, I'm not a big fan of having like 5-minute long conversations about like the football game or the weather. I would not do that at the stage of a appointment setting call, not at all. Like the people that they're busy, you just took time out of their day, and you gotta respect that. The only time I would start like cracking jokes on a call or asking about their day or the weather where they are is only if we had like a call scheduled from before and they've already allocated the time to it. But if you're calling somebody who like isn't necessarily expecting your call or hasn't set the time aside, just skip all the flattery and all the how are yous and how's your day been, and just get straight into it. So like in my example, I'm showing them who I am. It's an inbound lead. So I'm like, hey, it's Adrian. I saw that you clicked on my ad about becoming a remote setter. Start ringing a bell. I'm telling them why I'm calling. Now, the other side of the introduction is framing the call itself. And when you look at any sort of salesperson or appointment setter, they'll always, or at least good performing ones, most of the times they'll tell you that you need some form of upfront agenda. You need some upfront agreement of how the call is going to go. Because if you don't set an agenda for the call, if you don't set what do you call it, a frame of how the call is going to go, then people are just going to do whatever they want. It's like, imagine you walk into a doctor's office and the doctor is like, hey, look, so I need to diagnose you first. So I'm just going to ask you a few things. I need to understand where you're at. Let me just ask you these questions. And afterwards, I'll tell you like what you need to do about it. For example, right? Like I don't know exactly what they say, but if that's what the doctor says, imagine if somebody came into the doctor's office and started asking them questions like, why are you asking me this? Just give me the answer already. Just give me the price. Like by setting an upfront agreement a lot of the times, and you get them to agree to it, you are avoiding all that unnecessary hassle that might come up mid-call of people wanting to kind of overtake your process and do whatever the hell they want. Like, give me the price, tell me what you do, how much does it cost? Well, how much does it cost to send this price? But basically, yeah, the upfront agreement, the whole goal of it is to get both parties, so you and them, to agree on how the call is going to go. So then if the call does go south and they start, pushing back on you, you can always go back to the, hey, by the way, remember at the beginning of the call, we spoke about how I just want to understand if we can help you and make sure that what we have here is even a fit for you. So look, I just want to ask you these questions and then we can get into that later. Sound cool? Cool. An example of this in my script, for instance, would be, cool, so look, okay, this is not about the frame, this is just a random line I have here, but basically this is a frame. Yeah, this is it. As a heads up, I only work with people that I know I can help. So if it's cool with you, I just want to ask you a few questions, make sure that I can 100% help. Then if it sounds like I can, we can schedule a longer call. Do you have 5 minutes? Or does that make sense? Or are you opposed to that? This line right here just gives them a heads up of what the call is going to be like, and it gets them to agree to it and not rebuttal later on mid-discovery. There's always a chance that they'll push back, of course, like if midway through the questions. But what I found is that this dramatically reduces the pushback rate in your calls, just having an upfront agreement or a frame to your call. Now, the next thing is the triage. So after you've introduced yourself, the reason why you're calling, and you've set the frame for the call, you want to run what's called the triage. So there's a few goals to the triage. The first one is you want to qualify. You see, some companies, some companies that you work for as a setter, they'll always have qualification criteria, or they have a general list of things that make a lead qualified for them. So qualified, you want to think about it this way. It's like qualifications are the requirements that a prospect has to meet in order to be successful, or in order to be eligible to work with whatever company you're working with. An example of this is that when I was working with a company that worked with contractors, some of the qualifications is that they had to be willing to drive up to 50 miles in a radius from where they're located. From where they're located. The next qualification is that they had to have a radius. They had to be in a location where they had at least, I think it was like 800,000 people in their radius. Another qualification is that they're making at least 500,000 a year in revenue. Another qualification would be that they have at least 2 appointment setters on their team. Like these are qualifications tend to be like these logistical pieces of information that let the prospect know, or that let you know and the company know if you can actually help the prospect. Another example is like if you're being triaged by a nurse might ask you if you have any allergies, if you have like had this problem before. That's kind of like an example of what qualification looks like, kind of like the logistical information that lets them know what to actually do with you. Now, the second sort of point of the triage is understanding the current versus desired situation. And the reason why we want to do this here, this is very important. In sales, right? I'll explain in appointment setting what that means in a bit, but in the context of sales in general, the reason why you ask prospects questions isn't just for your own sake of understanding like where they're at or what they want to achieve. Like that's of course it helps you, but it's more so for them to tell themselves and give and reaffirm all the beliefs that they need in order to buy from you. So for example, somebody is not going to buy if they don't have a problem. And if that problem is not painful, it's not painful enough. If they don't have urgency, if they think that they can do it by themselves, if they don't have a goal, it's like these beliefs. If the prospects don't really have them, then they're just not gonna buy. It's like, do you go to a hospital without having any pain? Of course you don't. So why would you go book a meeting with somebody when you don't have a problem, right? And so when you're asking them these questions, it's mostly for them to tell you why they need your service indirectly. And it's called Socratic dialogue. It's basically you asking somebody a question to get them to realize something. And so you might ask somebody, well, actually, let's get into the questions right now. And I will say that there is no general consensus of in what order to ask these questions. Like these questions are very, very industry specific. Like, for example, in my case, I go over some of these, not all, but I know other companies that cover all of them. I know companies that even have a bit more than these. So I know companies that don't ask any of these at all and just get straight into booking a meeting, right? Which I don't advocate for. I don't agree with that. But these 6 or 7 question types are the primary sort of questions that are always, or 95% of the times, are going to be present in an appointment setting call, regardless of the industry, right? You're going to have at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these questions, maybe all of them. Now, okay, I'll cover this in a minute, but let's speak about the first thing that you want to understand. The first thing that tends to be the most common is a problem/current situation. Again, you would not go eat food unless you were hungry, unless you had like some bacteria or some eating disorder, right? So the thing about the problem is you want to identify a reason, you want to give them a reason to even want to have a 30-minute conversation with a salesperson. And that reason is created through the problem, because again, problems are what drive people to take action. Like people don't just do actions like without a reason. Like they always, if you think about anything that you do, it was always to solve a problem. It's like if you eat food, it's because you have the problem that you feel hungry, right? If you buy a bigger monitor, maybe it's because you have the problem that like your monitor is too small and you can't see things properly. If you get glasses, it's because you have eye problems, right? It's like you don't do things without a reason to, and that reason to tends to be a problem or some form of pain. And so in an appointment setting call, what these questions might look like would be questions like, what's the biggest constraint, right? Like what's the constraint? What's the bottleneck? What's the challenge that made you want to fill out the form? For me, for example, the question that I ask about this would be, well, this is just some background, by the way. We'll speak about background questions in a bit. And another thing I almost forgot to mention is these questions can go in any order. Like you could start off with you can start off with qualification questions, then get into urgency, then get into problem, then get into this and that. There is no general order. Now, there is a recommended order, which is what I'm going to speak about. And funny enough, what I have here is, in my opinion, the recommended order. But in my case, I start off with the problem is like, what made you want to start looking for something different, right? That's my version of finding the problem. So another example that we used to ask is, for some companies, we would ask them like, how many more jobs can you take on? That's assuming I'm working with a contractor. And the contractor is like, I can take 5 more jobs. Okay, cool. Well, in your eyes, what do you feel like is the biggest thing stopping you from finding those 5 jobs at the moment, a month, that you can take on? So in this case, we just want to ask questions to identify what the problem is, or what's keeping them, or what even got them to reach out to us. And if we're reaching out to them, we can always frame it as, hey, by the way, look, most people I speak with, they have one of 3 problems. Either their appointment setters just are not booking enough appointments, maybe their show rate is really bad, or the quality of their appointments are completely off. From these 3 things that I just mentioned, what do you feel like is the most relevant to you, right? And they might give you one, they might not, whatever. Some more examples of these questions. What's the biggest bottleneck in the business at the moment? What do you feel like you need the most help with in your dating life? Or when it comes to your mindset, what do you feel like is stopping you from getting to 10K a month? That's some different questions of different ways to frame the question. Now, when you do get the problem, and by the way, for all these questions, I want to say something very important, which is you want to probe. Like probing questions are not standalone. They're not standalone questions. Like they're not questions that exist on their own. They're always paired up with some other form of question. What I mean by this is, look, imagine I walk up to you, and I'm like, "Tell me more." It makes no sense at all, right? And if I ask you, if you don't say anything, and I'm just like, "What do you mean?" It doesn't make sense at all, right? Now, imagine this. Imagine I walk up to somebody, I'm like, "How's your day been?" And they say, "It's been bad." It's bad? Why is that? That's a probing question. If somebody tells me they need more leads, or that their biggest problem is getting more leads to the door, a probing question might be, "Tell me more." Leads? What do you mean? Give me an example. Like these are probing questions, right? And if I go back to my script here, you can see that these are different types of probing questions that I might have. Like, gotcha, tell me more. What do you mean when you say X? Give me an example. Why do you want to move away from that? So probing questions, to give you a little summary, are questions that are used to get somebody to expand further on something. Think of it like a detective. And excuse my drawing here, but I'm going to try to grow some glasses, all right? So imagine these are glasses, right? So you want to think of yourself as like a detective, right? And you as a detective, you want to probe, you want to investigate, you want to ask these kinds of questions to get people to open up. And the mistake that a lot of appointment setters do is they take surface level answers and they just move on from that. You know, if I ask somebody, what's the biggest constraint in your business at the moment? And they just say leads, what the rookie appointment setter might do is be like, okay, cool. Well, what's your goal? Like they didn't really get a good answer. They just got a surface level answer. And again, we are doing this so that the prospect can tell themselves why they should dedicate time to meet with you. All right. So then that's why it's really important that we probe into the problem. So my example, since it's the simplest one to use, I might ask somebody, well, hey, look, you've been working as a cashier for the last 2 years. What's made you want to start looking for something different? They might say, well, I just don't like my job. Interesting. Tell me more. Yeah, well, I've been working as a cashier for the last 2 years. I'm not getting paid enough money. I'm barely like getting by. And yeah, I just don't like it. Okay. What do you mean by barely getting by? Oh, like I'm basically making just enough money to pay all my living expenses, and there's nothing that I can do afterwards. Okay. Well, how long has that been going on for? Oh, actually, they already mentioned that. Scratch that question. But I might ask another question like, well, how's that impacted you on a personal level? Like getting to the end of the month and not having any money left over for yourself and only being able to afford your bills. Like now these questions, they build on top of each other. They make sense, right? You want these probing questions to think of it. Okay, now it makes sense to pull up this example. You want to think of this like a thread that you find, but then you don't fully unravel. Like, let me explain. Imagine you have a big ball of thread, right? Imagine this is like a bunch of thread. As a setter, what you want to do is you want to find that little piece of thread that's sticking out. This is what you want to find, okay? This right here. The little thread that's sticking out. Your job as a setter is to find that thread, maybe like pull on it a little bit. Like maybe you're pulling it from like here, right? Like, I don't know if this is a good way to demonstrate this, but you want to kind of like pull on it. And when you pull on it, you don't want to go super deep. And here's another mistake that people do that goes back to knowing when not to ask certain questions. Some people butcher their own calls because they try to go very deep at the stage of a phone call when the prospect has never, like maybe you guys are 5 minutes into a conversation and you're asking them about his fucking situation with his spouse, you know? Like you don't want to go really deep. You want to go just deep enough to where you're pulling on that thread, but you're not fully unraveling all of it. Because you also don't want to take away from what the closer can do. Because if you're getting all the pain, all the emotions right now, not only is your goal going to go on for a lot longer, but then you're also taking away from what the salesperson can do in their meeting. So the way you want to think of it is you want to do just enough to get enough leverage to book the meeting. Like the goal here is to book a meeting with somebody that you know you can help. And to make them actually show up to it, of course. That's another goal. And making sure that they show up to it in the right environment. But what you don't want to do is like get all this unnecessary information or go super deep on certain things only to take away from the call that in which you're actually going to buy. Again, we just need enough information to justify getting them on a meeting, right? And so the first thing, like I said, it's the problem and the current situation, getting them to expand on it. You know, what has made you look for something different? Tell me more. What do you mean by X? Give me an example. That's pretty much the first point. Right. And again, like find the thread, let the closer pull on it. Another example of this would be with imagine you're trying to find an injury or like trying to find a wound. It's like you want to find the wound, maybe rub some salt on it, but like don't fully rip it out. Leave that job for the closer. You just want to get enough information to get the meeting, but you also don't want to just be surface level, because when you're surface level, you're basically sounding like everybody else, and there's no differentiation. And yeah, I mean, I don't think I have to yap too much about that topic anymore. We can come back to it later. Now, the next kind of questions after problem/current situation are urgency and consequence-based questions. And there's a definition I'd like to make, which is like there's a problem and then there's pain. A problem is the bottleneck. It's what's keeping somebody from achieving something. If I am trying to, I don't know, like let's say my eyesight is not good enough. So my problem is that my eyesight isn't good enough. Therefore, I need glasses. The pain would be that because my eyesight isn't good enough, I can't see properly from far away. And if I'm driving at night without glasses, I might get into a car crash, and that will be very bad. I might put my life at risk. I might destroy my car, right? The pain of having bad eyesight is I might die because I can't drive properly, because I can't see properly, or I might just like destroy my car, right? Another example with that is, let's say with hunger. Like the problem might be that you're hungry, but the pain of hunger, well, there's physical pain first of all, but then the pain is like, I know some people that when they're hungry, they get very agitated, they get irritated, they can't focus, they can't sit still, right? And so like, imagine that person had a business meeting and they're like, oh shoot, I haven't eaten anything. The pain of the hunger is probably going to be that they're gonna get distracted from their business meeting and they won't be able to deliver as much value, which might put their job at risk. It's like you see how one problem can have so many knock-on effects, and that's what we get into when we talk about urgency and pain. And so pain and consequences, the thing about appointment setting, by the way, is like you don't want to go super deep on this. Like I said, you kind of want to like rub salt on the wound, but don't pull it out fully, because if you go too deep in pain in the setting call, there's two things that can happen, which is number one, because it's like like you're not even speaking to somebody face to face. It's like a completely new call. There's no sort of rapport established. There's a chance that they get because of the lack of trust, they become very opposed or very against answering that truthfully, because like they just met you. Why should they tell you about their pains, right? For instance. But the other thing as well is like if you get all the pain inside of the triage call, again, you're taking away from what the closer can do in the closing call, because then they can't re-ask the same questions without seeming redundant. So you want to make sure you're not taking away from the closer. And so, like honestly, for a lot of companies or a lot of setters, I tell them not to go. Like some of them, I tell them not to use urgency because they have a huge upside. Don't get me wrong. Like the upside of having urgency-based questions is very high, but then they also have the most downside, meaning that if you don't ask the questions correctly, or if you ask them in the wrong time or in the wrong order, they're the ones that can destroy your calls the most. Like I've had calls with contractors where I'm speaking to them about their business, and they're telling me how the biggest challenge is that their Facebook ads aren't working and that they're spending so much money on it and they're not making anything back. And so I'd be like, yeah, so how has that impacted the business? And they'll be like, what do you mean, bro? I'm not making enough money. Like that, you see how that's a dumb question to ask in that context, right? And it breaks the trust with the prospect. So what are some examples of urgency-based questions? Let's get into that. In here, it would be something like, what's the most frustrating part about where you're at right now? And again, these are a bit like some more probing questions based off of that, which is like, what kind of impact does it have on you outside of work? What does that look like day to day? How long has it been like that? How much longer are you willing to deal with that? These are questions that bring up pain. In the context of B2B, I was having a call recently with a B2B client, and their biggest challenge was their show rate. And so in their context, they had like 30% show rate. They wanted to get 50, 60%. So when we dug into the pain, I would ask questions like, well, how much is the show rate at? It's 30%. Okay. Well, do you have closers right now? Yes. How many do you have? 2 closers. Okay. How long have they been with you? About a week. What happens if the show rate stays that way? Well, my closers are not going to be happy with it and they might leave me. Interesting. How would you feel about that? Well, I would not like that at all, because it took me so much time to onboard them and hire them. They're such great talent. I don't want to churn my closers like that, and I want to make sure that my team is taken care of. Okay, cool. Like, you see how that is a good example of urgency, or creating urgency, or finding some form of consequence. Maybe that was a bit deep, the example that I just gave, but let's think of another one. Another one would be, let's say, another B2B example with contractors. Yeah, so tell me, what's the biggest constraint in the business when it comes to getting more leads? Well, again, like we need more leads. Leads are a problem. Most services that I'm trying are a scam, and the people that are like my word of mouth and referrals are drying out, and I need some form of method to get new leads. I see. Okay. So how many jobs, let's say last month, did you get from word of mouth? 2. What about the month before that? 5. Okay. What about the month before last month? None. Interesting. Has it been inconsistent for you? Yeah, it has been inconsistent. I'm guessing you have a team to provide for, right? How are you keeping them if there's not always enough work on the table. Well, yeah, my team sometimes they can't work with me. They actually have to get another job because I can't keep them busy enough, and I can't keep paying them without them doing any work. I'd love to keep them busy, but they always have to go and get another sort of job on the side because I don't have a consistent flow of jobs. Okay, I see. Like, you see how now they turn from I need more leads, or leads is my problem, to because I don't have a good enough lead generation, my workflow is inconsistent, and because it's inconsistent, I can't consistently provide for my guys, and that means that they're going out to other companies looking for work, and I might lose them. Like, that's kind of the whole goal of urgency and consequence-based questions. So, do we move on from that? The next set of question types that you can ask are, what have they tried? Now, the reason why we want to ask them about what they tried before is so that we can differentiate ourselves from that at the stage of the mini pitch, which we'll talk about in a minute. But if let's say you don't ask about what they tried before, and you go immediately, like, you ask about problem, you ask about pain, and then you just pitch them, and you tell them what you do, they might say, well, I actually tried a company like you guys, and it was really bad. They ended up scamming me, so I'm not really interested in doing that anymore. Have a good day. Goodbye. That's what we want to avoid. We want to avoid circumstances where where the prospects think that you're the same as something else they tried in the past that didn't work for them. And the way that we want to do that is by, first of all, understanding what they tried so that we can then differentiate ourselves from it. Now, we don't want to go super deep. We don't want to have like every list of every little thing we try. Like, the closer can do that. But in your case as a setter, you just want to ask a question, like what I have right here, which is, what have you tried so far to change that? This is B2C example again. So they might say, well, I have tried an online program where they teach me how to do drop shipping. Interesting. How did that work out? Well, it did not work out well. I actually tried that. I paid them $2,000, and I never made any of my money back in 2 months or 3 months. Why didn't you think that didn't work? Or yeah, what happened? Why do you think that didn't work out for you? Well, I don't know, man. I tried the drop shipping, but like the method was oversaturated. Too many people went to the same market. It wasn't going to work out from the beginning. They were selling it to so many people. I see. So then at the end of the call, when I'm getting to the pitch, I can explain to them how there's not that many appointment setters that are good out there, so that the market is less saturated, right? Like, I can customize my pitch to them based on what they tried before to show them that I am different from everything else that they've tried before. Because another example would be, let's say with a marketing company, B2B, a good example. Okay, let's say I'm speaking to a contractor. I'm like, what have you tried before to generate leads on a consistent basis? That contractor might say, well, I've tried Angie's List, I've tried Yelp, I've tried Facebook ads. Okay, wait, pause for a minute. Let's say with Angie's List, how did that work out for you? Well, it was horrible, man. We were getting a lot of bad leads that I would call them, they would never respond. And even if they did respond, they wanted the job 2 years from now. They weren't even good enough. They were just tire kickers. I see. Okay. Well, what about Facebook? Tell me, how did that work? Well, I'm doing that. I'm having a company do that for me, and I'm paying them every month. And the problem is that because they have no skin in the game, I feel like they're not doing enough of a job. Okay, what kind of results are you getting with that? Well, in the last 2 months, I got no leads, man. No jobs from it. I see. And then we can kind of get into urgency questions, like, so no jobs in the last 2 months. Like, has that put your business in a tough position? Right? And so imagine in this case, so now that I know what they tried before, in my pitch, I might say something like, hey, so you know how before you tried all these different, you tried working with this Facebook company and this Angie's List that got you, first of all, you didn't get consistent leads and because they had no skin in the game. And second of all, you got leads that were completely shit and they would never respond to you or wanted to do the job in 2 years from now. Is that accurate? Yeah, cool. So what we do is we actually, first of all, we put our money to get you leads. So you only pay us per appointment. More importantly, per qualified appointment. So if you have somebody who's looking for the job in 2 years from now, or if you have somebody who doesn't even pick up the phone, you're not going to pay us for that, right? And now you're differentiating yourself from those things that they tried. Because imagine now, I did not ask that question and I just get straight into my pitch and I'm like, yeah, so we actually get you qualified appointments. Like, of course, we qualify them before we send them over to you, and you only pay us when they're qualified and when they show up. It's like, they might be like, nah, I'm doing that with a company like this right now and I'm getting scammed. It's like, they don't have no context, you know, like the way that you describe what you do, it sounds exactly what they're trying right now, even though objectively it might not be the same thing. But in their mind, it is the same thing. And so we want to ask these kinds of questions around what they tried before, these method-based or solution-based questions, so that we know, like, hey, what's not working for them? How can we differentiate ourselves from that? And can we actually differentiate ourselves from that, right? So this is the third kind of question. The next kind of question is around the goal and desired situation. Again, we want to create current situation and desired situation. And the way you want to think about, like, appointment setting is you have point A and you have point B. Right, whoever you're in a call with, they most likely, you know, unless it's a cold call, they oftentimes want to get from point A to point B. And what's in between point A and point B is called the gap, right? Gap. So the bigger the gap, the more reason that somebody has to buy in general. Now you don't have to worry about like how big the gap is or how much pain or how much desire you have. That's for the closer to worry about. What you only want to worry about is making sure that you have a clearly established point A and point B. Because again, like if somebody just goes to a doctor because they have back pain, it's like sure that's point A, but then point B is that they want to be pain free, right? Like they wouldn't go to the doctor if they had the pain. Let's put it this way: if they had back pain and they go to the doctor, they wouldn't buy from them just because they had the pain. They would also buy because they wanted the solution or the goal, which is relief. And so that's why we want to ask about the goal and the desired situation. So what this might look like in here would be questions like, so ultimately, what's your main goal with transitioning to remote work? What are you looking to get out of this? Well, I'm looking to make 5K a month. I really want to move to Bali because I saw like all the entrepreneurs are living there and it's like such a great place to be in. And it's just really interesting. Like I've always seen these videos on Bali and whatever and find it really cool. Nice, man. And like what's your long-term vision? Like I'm really curious to know because it sounds like you have a lot of aspirations when it comes to this and being in Bali. Like what are you trying to build long-term? Oh man, like I would love to have my own spa business one day and in Bali and just like sell that to like high ticket entrepreneurs. I feel like that's my purpose. That's really what I want to build. Wow, nice, man. I feel like sounds like you've thought about that before. Why is that? Well, why do you want to do that? Well, I mean, it's the one thing that actually builds me joy. I just love spas and I love touching men. Like you get my point, right? Like you basically want to find the goal or the vision that motivates them to take action. Because again, like humans are always moving away from pain, right? So they're moving away from pain, but then they're moving towards pleasure, towards a desire. And of course, like when we ask about the goal and the desired situation, you might ask somebody, well, how much money are you trying to make? And it might be like just more money. Like you can't take that as a surface level. You want to be like, okay, how much is more? Like, to you exactly, what does that mean? Like I don't know, I want to make 30,000 a month extra. Nice, man. It sounds like you've thought about that before. Why is that? Or 30,000 a month, what would that change for you guys? Or if you have 30,000 a month extra worth of work every month, how do you feel? How would your employees feel about that? Depends on the context of the situation. Again, you don't just want to ask questions without context. This is why we literally said here, which is like, well, it's kind of a mix of multiple principles. Like, don't sound robotic, know when not to ask certain questions, know the script by heart, and most importantly, seek to understand and consult, not just sell. Because when you're trying to consult them, you can then tailor your questions to them, right? And by the way, when it comes to knowing the script by heart, an analogy I always give is the suit tailor analogy. It's like imagine your script is your suit and then you're a suit tailor. It's like you have your baseline suit always. It's like you have your script fully memorized, so like you know how to make the suits happen. But then whenever you're speaking to somebody, you are tailoring the suit to them specifically depending on the situation. So you want to think of your script as like that suit that you have, but then whenever you're speaking to somebody, you want to think of it as tailoring that suit to them. And so the context of the questions will a lot of the times depend on the prospect you're speaking with, right? So don't just think that, just because I ask somebody a question this way, you should ask it the exact same way. There should be context behind it. Now, the next kinds of questions that we have here are partner decision maker based questions. And here's the thing, like sometimes to make a decision or for the prospect, like for them to come to a decision of whether or not they want to buy from you, sometimes they have a partner that they want to discuss with, or they have a decision maker that needs to make a decision in the business, right? An example in B2C would be, let's say somebody wants to learn how to like buy appointment setting coaching from me, training, right? For them, they might have a wife, and before they spend however much money to work with me, they might want to consult with their wife because like she also manages the bank account or the balances. Imagine if I just had a call with him, right, and I convinced him on why he should do this, but then he's still yet to convince his wife. Now, if that guy goes to his wife and he's like, yeah, babe, it's going to be $50,000. That's not how much I charge, but throwing out an example. The wife would be like, oh, 50,000, that's a lot of money. Now you're not going to spend 50,000 to learn an appointment setting. You can just watch free videos. Like, why would you do that? And suddenly all the work that I did with that prospect in discovery and all the belief reframing and all the pitching and all that kind of stuff that I did has now gone to waste because, again, they're giving somebody the price when that person has no sort of context on the value they're getting out of it. It goes back to the same point of like, never give price on like a setting call. But then in this case, it's like if the partner doesn't make it to the call with the salesperson, they're most likely not going to get a decision done, at least not on the first call. And so you're going to waste time for the salesperson. It's not going to be like a one call close. And overall, you're making less money, right? And it's a very simple question. Like when it comes to decision maker questions, the only questions you want to ask are something like, let's say it's B2B. Hey, what does the leadership look like in your company? Are you the one who runs the show, or do you have a partner who kind of takes decisions with you on this? you know? Or hey, when it comes to deciding on who to work with this kind of stuff, is it just you who takes the decisions, or do you have somebody else with that? Or what does the leadership look like? Very simply put. In B2C, it might be like, by the way, so for if you wanted to decide to go into this or to do something like this, would there be anybody else who you'd want their opinion or who you'd want to consult before you do this, right? And then they might say, I have my wife, I have my spouse, and then the goal is to get that person on the call as well. So these are very straightforward kind of questions. And another thing I want to give as well is like a B2B example. Imagine in B2B, you don't get the decision maker on the, like imagine you're speaking to a homeowner who wants to remodel their kitchen. And then you book an appointment such that the contractor is going to go out there to give them an estimate, but then the wife is not home. So the contractor goes to the house, does the whole sales process, gives them the estimate, and the contractor tells the guy, so to remodel your kitchen, it's going to be $10,000. And the husband's like, okay, cool, I love it. Like everything you showed me makes sense. I see the pricing, I see everything. I just got to speak to my wife now. So the contractor will be like, okay, great, I'll see you tomorrow. Whatever. Speak to your wife and tell me about it. So when the husband goes up to the wife and she's like, hey, babe, this contractor that I spoke with, he said it's going to be $10,000. The wife is going to say, 10,000? But I know Carlos on the street does it for 3,000. Why would you pay this guy 10,000? But then again, the husband has all the context of the materials, the value, the whys, the beliefs, and it's going to be so much harder for the husband to convince the wife because he's not a salesperson, right? That's what the whole aspect. That's why you have a salesperson to convince people and to change their beliefs. And so when the husband goes up to the wife and he's like, "Yeah, babe, it's 10K," and she's like, "Bro, why would you pay 10K? We have Carlos that can do it for 3K." It changes the entire frame of the sale, and now it's very less likely for you to actually get the sale. So you want to make sure you get the partner and decision makers on calls most of the times. Last but not least, the other types of questions that we have are qualification-based questions. These are questions that are more so logistical and that you ask as a way of not necessarily bringing up emotional pain or desire, but more so just as a way to qualify somebody on their logistics. For example, in my case, I ask somebody, say you got a remote role, how many hours can you do per week? If somebody can only do part-time and they can't do full-time, even if it's like just on paper, I can't help that person. Like, because especially for a beginner, like to get a part-time job as a setter as a beginner, yeah, not that many opportunities out there. What you can do, by the way, is you can get full-time jobs and then only work part-time because you're getting good results. But then you have to at least be willing to put full-time work in if you're trying to make it work, right? So if somebody says, no, I can't do full-time, I can only do 10 hours a week, then I'm like, yeah, sorry, but that won't really work. I would say like 30 to 40 hours a week is the ideal range. Again, you can get away with doing less once you're skilled enough. Another question would be, what are they doing for the work? Like, are they students? Are they working at the moment? Because again, if they're not working, I have to get an idea of where they're getting their finances from to be able to even afford this. So I know if having a meeting is even going to be worth the time, right? What other questions do I have here that are logistical? That's pretty much it, actually. That's pretty much, this is not really like a qualification question. This is more like a nice to know kind of thing. But for another company, so back to the example that I gave of the contractor or marketing business, that business might only work with contractors who are in a specific area, maybe who have like a specific number of salespeople, who are doing, let's say, 500,000 a year in revenue. Like these qualification questions are logistical questions that are custom to every company, right? Every company, they're going to have their own sort of qualification criteria. So overall, these are all the kind of questions that go into the triage. And generally speaking, the longest part of the setting call is going to be the triage itself. To summarize, we're going to get problem, such current situation. We're going to get pain and urgency. We're going to figure out what they tried, find out the goal and the desired situation, figure out the partners and decision makers, ask our qualification questions, and most importantly, probe into anything that we can. Whilst keeping in mind that we don't want to go super deep, we just want to find the thread and let the closer pull on it. That's the way that you want to envision this. So now, you've done the triage, you've gotten all the information. What is the next step? The next step is the mini pitch. Now, the reason why it's called a mini pitch is because you're not doing a full pitch, you're doing a mini one, right? So, an example of this is like, imagine a nurse is they triage you, and now they're trying to refer you to the appropriate doctor. That nurse might say, all right, well, Adrian, you seem pretty healthy, you seem like everything's well. We just spoke about how your toenail is ingrown, and for that reason, you have to go and see a podiatrist. I don't know if that's the name of the doctor, but you get my point. For that reason, you have to go see a podiatrist who will then, like, basically take out that nail and just disinfect the area. whatever, right? It's like they're giving you the next best step. And the main key here is you do not want to oversell. The mistake that people do when they're pitching in a setting call is they yap and yap and yap and yap about all the features, about all the benefits, about everything that's so great about their product. But then again, that's for the sales call. You don't want to be doing that here. And even in a sales call, you don't want to like just yap about features without stop. But just for some context, like the way that you want to think about it is you want to actually this ties into like what I have right here, which is like you want to give just enough information to entice them or to hook them. It's like imagine you're fishing, right? You want to put enough meat or information in the pitch so that they bite onto the hook and they become interested enough to then book a meeting with you, as opposed to giving them everything up front and giving them no reason to book a meeting. It's like the same reason why you don't give them price or you don't give them the entire spiel of what you do in the setting call is because if you give them all that, then they have no reason to get on a meeting because it's like, okay, I have all the information. I'm just going to go think about it now. And now you're getting into like sales objections that you shouldn't be having in a setting call. So again, you want to pitch just enough to give them the enough information to entice them enough to make them want to book a call and use it as leverage instead of giving them everything up front. So when you're pitching somebody, right, most companies will have a line by line kind of pitch that they use. But what I like to do as well, like if once you become more experienced, is that you want to tie their situation to your solution. So with the example that I gave you before, of like imagine there's a contractor who used Facebook ads and they were getting a lot of unqualified leads. The way that I framed it is, so hey, you know how you told me that you're doing Facebook and with Facebook you're getting a lot of leads who never responded or who wanted to do a kitchen job 2 years from now? Well, the thing is you don't pay us unless we get you leads who want to do the job in 90 days or less. Like now I'm customizing my pitch to them. And that's a bit more advanced and it comes with practice. But ideally in a pitch, in a perfect mini pitch, you want to tie their current situation into your solution and while keeping it high level, right? I'm not going too deep into features and stuff. The next thing is you want to sell the conversation with a closer. Again, the same way that a nurse tells you that the doctor is the person that's going to be able to solve your problems, you want to make that same frame happen in the mini pitch. You want to say, hey, let me put it this way. When a salesperson is speaking with a client, the salesperson wants to sell the deal. They want to get the sale. You as a seller, you want to sell the conversation, not the sale, not the service or the product itself. So you want to position the conversation with the salesperson as the solution to all these different things that we just spoke about in the setting goal, right? So that's why we want to find these things, because these things then act as leverage so that we can justify a meeting with the closer by positioning the closer as the solution to their problems. Let's say, with an example of the contractor, I might tell them, hey, look, I'm going to get you on with Brian. And this guy, he has worked with many different contractors like yourself who are also using Facebook and we're also not getting any results with it. And he's helping go from 3 million a year up to 10 million a year just with, like paying per appointments. And so he's going to walk you through exactly how to do that without spending all the time chasing leads that want to do it in 2 years from now. It's like you're basically telling them that once they actually speak to the closer, they'll get the answer to all these pains and problems and questions that they had here. And last but not least, you just want to give them enough information to entice and hook them. So let me give an example with my sort of pitch, right? Now, this is I pitch people to book a meeting with me. So it's not like I'm pitching them on somebody else. I have two sort of examples. I'm just going to go for like the base one, the template one, the one that I can always repeat. So let's say, James, based on what you told me, I believe that I can help you. What I do is I help people get into a remote appointment setting. These are online sales roles where you basically book meetings for companies who have a lot of interested leads and they need somebody to actively reach out to them or handle those calls. It's on fully remotely and pays you commissions where you can make typically anywhere from 2K to 5K plus a month, depending on how much work you put in. The best part about this is that you can do this with little to no prior experience and realistically get a role within 8 weeks. Now, I don't want to get into all the details now. That's what the next call is going to be for. What I'd like to do is get you in a proper strategy session where we blah, 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 blah. Right? And again, like I'm saying this, keeping in mind that we had a whole ass discovery. So then this pitch by default is positioned differently from the things that they have tried. And if I want to go a step further than this, which is what I usually do on these calls, is I might say like, hey, look, based on what you've told me about trying dropshipping and having been scammed out of $2,000 for 3 months, look, I believe I can help you get out of that because I was in the exact same situation. And I've helped so many people who were also in that role before. So what I do is I take people exactly in that situation where, for example, they're trying things that have no real value to the world, which means that they don't can't justify making good money consistently from it, and then I get them into remote appointment setting roles. They get 2K to 6K plus a month, and because appointment setting is a real skill that you can justify, that creates value for other companies, you can consistently make money with it. Unlike some of these scams that charge you 2K for like an AI course to sell like OnlyFans pictures, right? Feet pictures. So these are online sales roles where you're basically booking meetings with companies, blah 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 blah. And like you even told me, right, you want to move to Bali, right? You want to be in Bali, and I'm sure that in Bali you don't want to be working like 12 hours a day, like a fucking robot, fucking coding or anything like that, right? Because you want to live in Bali and have all this freedom to go and have these adventures with your boys, you want to have something that is flexible, that you can spend enough time and energy into, that doesn't take away from other things of your life. And this is what this does for you. Now, keep in mind, I'm doing a super long spiel. I usually wouldn't yap as much. I'm trying to come up with an example on the spot, so bear with me for a minute. But that's pretty much what the pitch is going to be. As a beginner, you mostly want to use the default template pitch that a company is going to give you when you come work with them. Most of them will have one. Now, the next step after you give them the pitch is you want to book the meeting and propose the next steps. The first thing I want to say is you want to assume the set. You never want to ask somebody, would you like to book a meeting with me? No. You want to say, I have tomorrow or after tomorrow available. What works for you? This is the option set, the option flow. Like, you can do AM or PM. Like, you always give people two options and they'll choose one of them. If you ask somebody, would you like to book a meeting? They'll just say no or yes. You know, it's not a huge change, but it's a small one that still has a bit of an impact. But if you say, okay, so what I'd like to do is get us on a meeting to walk you through exactly how this works, A to Z. Now, we are pretty busy and you need to be on a computer for it. What would be the best time that you'd be behind a computer? Would you be available tomorrow or the day after tomorrow? It's so much easier for them to just be like, yeah, tomorrow works. Instead of being like, because then you're making them think about what time works for them instead of what time, or instead of can they make the meeting, right? So you're going straight for the close. And the same thing applies to like when you're choosing a time. You don't just say, so somebody's like, yeah, tomorrow. Cool. You want to do morning or afternoon? Morning. Okay, I have a 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. 11 a.m. Great. And what's the best email? Boom. And what's the next thing? And what's the next thing? And what's the next thing? It's like, the and frame is a whole different one, but the main thing you want to know is like just make sure you always give two options. Then once you actually ask for the meeting or you get the meeting, the next thing you want to do is get logistics down. Now, logistics might look like date and time, their email, their meeting, location, etc. You know, so this is going to be custom to each company, but then this is also helpful for you to know as well. Because sometimes when you're booking an appointment, you don't just need the email or the date and time or like telling them like if the meeting's going to be in person or Zoom or whatever. Sometimes you can go a step further and help them show up or help them get clear. Pretty much help them show up by giving them more logistics or getting other logistics down. Let me explain. So, for example, with this company I'm working with, one of the biggest challenges is show rate. So what I saw in the script is like when sellers book a meeting, they just get the email, they get the date and the time, and they just book the meeting without anything else. So an example of getting logistics down would be something like, hey, by the way, this is going to be a Zoom meeting and you're going to need to be in front of a computer for that. Would you be by a computer Tuesday at 5 p.m.? Yes. Okay, cool. That's one logistic down. Other logistic down. By the way, we've made a video that we can send over that's going to walk you through and give you an idea of who we are and what we've done for other companies like yourself. It's a 5-minute long video. It's going to give you a heads up so at least you know what you're walking into. When do you think you can watch it? Just send it over. I'll watch it in the next hour. Okay, great. Another thing would be, by the way, I just booked the meeting and you should have received the invite to your email. Can you go in the email and click yes so that it shows up on your calendar? Like these are the post-booking steps that take place that you basically ask somebody to do them. I don't think I have anything like that. Oh, there we go. Yep. This is the, hey, can you accept the invite so it shows up in your calendar? Yeah, great. Well, that's pretty much it. All you need to do in the meeting is click on the link to join in. I'm looking forward to it, blah, blah, blah. Back to the other example of the company. I might ask a question like, hey, by the way, I'm going to call you a few hours before the meeting to make sure that nothing crazy came up and that you're still able to make it. Is that cool with you? Okay, great. Can you save my number in this just so you know it's me? Yes. Now, look, I'm not saying you should use all these questions all in the same process because you're probably going to piss some people off. But you definitely want to have some form of logistics or next steps that take place that help the prospect show up and show up in the right conditions to be sold to. Those are the two keywords here. Now, another thing that you want to do here is tie down. Now, a tie down is, or double tie down, is getting somebody to commit to something that they said they were going to do. Like, let's say I asked somebody, hey, are you, so Tuesday, 5 p.m., is that a good time? Let's say I asked them, okay, Tuesday, are you available in the morning or afternoon? Morning. Do you want to do 10 a.m. or 11 a.m.? 11 a.m. Cool. So Jaden, I just want to let you know that our schedule gets filled up very fast, and for that reason, rescheduling can be a little bit difficult. So just so nothing comes up for you, or just so we can, just so nothing goes wrong, would there be any reason at all that you wouldn't be able to make it to our meeting on Tuesday at 11 a.m.? No, no reason at all. Okay, great. Another example would be, hey, by the way, so what works best, AM or PM? PM. Okay, you want to do 4 p.m. or 5 p.m.? 5 p.m. Okay, cool. So Tuesday at 5 p.m., just to be sure, I'm not going to be chasing you around like a crazy ex trying to get you to show up, am I? No, okay, cool, nice. So you're getting them to reaffirm what they just told you, because when somebody tells you something twice, they're more likely to commit to it. It's like if I'm speaking to my friend, I'm like, let's go to Madrid Center tomorrow at 5 p.m. And they're like, yeah, cool, let's do it. And I'm like, are you sure? And they're like, yeah. Are you sure? Yeah, I told you I'm sure. Yeah, they're more likely to show up when they confirm something multiple times. Of course, you don't want to spam somebody and like triple tie down. Most you wanna do this like twice, where you ask somebody, okay, so Tuesday 5 p.m. right? Cool. And any reason you can't make that? No reason at all. Nice. And then you move on. You don't want to like spam somebody, right? And just infinitely tie down. And it's also situational. Like if somebody says with confidence that they'll be there, you don't really need to tie down twice. But then if you ask somebody, okay, Tuesday 5 p.m., any reason why you can't make that at all? And they're like, yeah, no reason. I don't think so. You can be like, you don't think so? Are you sure? Like just as an extra way to probe, depending on the situation if it's needed. So that's an example of a tie down. Another tie down could be with, hey, by the way, I'm going to watch that video. Can you make sure you watch it? Okay, cool. Perfect. Then, wait. Yeah, I'm going to send, sorry, let me backtrack. I'm going to send you a video that's 5 minutes long. That'll explain a little bit more about what we do so you're ready for a call. Can you watch it? Cool. Perfect. Can you watch it in the next 5 minutes though? Yes. Okay, cool. Not the best framing or not the best wording, but it's along the lines of that. And another thing that you could do in the end is hyping up the closer and just giving your closing words. Now, this is, again, situational. You don't always want to do it. But if you're speaking to, let's say something we used to do as well. Actually, I gave an example of this before, which is like, hey, by the way, James, you're going to be speaking with Brian, who has helped so many other real estate agents like yourself scale from $1 million a year in commissions all the way up to $5 million a year. So he has the exact blueprint to help guys like you who have tried all these things and they just haven't been able to make it work. So I'm really looking to you guys' conversation. I'm so excited for you guys. I'm very excited for you. Whatever. It's like you're hyping up the closer. You're giving them a reason why this person is an expert. An example of this is when I recently had a surgery done. When I was speaking to the nurse, she was like, oh, by the way, we're going to get you with the head doctor. Like, he has been in the industry for over 10 years, and he's a leader of the entire, the surgeon team. And she gave me, like, his name and all. So, for me, when I think of, like, what was his name? I don't know, like, Sergio. I don't know if that was his name or not, but you get my point. Like, when I think about that person, and I think about their expertise and what they're going to be covering with me, I'm so much more likely to show up to them, to show up to the call and be looking forward to a conversation than it being framed as me getting on a call with a salesperson, right? So that's pretty much it for booking the meeting and the next steps. Now, don't worry, we're almost done. I know it's been going on for a little while. What happens if at any point in the call you get an objection? Because objections don't necessarily come up just at the end. In an appointment setting call, they can come up at any point in the call. And that's where we get into objection handling. Now, there's 3 types of objections, I would say, in a setting call. The first one is smoke screens. Now, smoke screens, these are 90% of your objections that you're going to get in a setting call, and they're fake objections, not real objections. Now, why do I say that they're fake? Let's give an example. Imagine you call somebody, and it's an inbound lead, and you're like, hey, you set the frame. I want to ask you a few questions, make sure I can help you, and then based off of that, I can get you in a meeting with the right person. Sound cool? Cool. So I guess the best place to start would be, what's your biggest challenge? Oh, hey man, sorry, but I've got to go right now. Can you call me back like at a different time? Now you might think that a callback is like a real objection, right? Like, oh, this guy's busy, like he can't attend my call right now. Let me just call him back later. But we realize that so many times these things that people tell you, they're just knee jerks, and a knee jerk is like, hold up, how do I make this without? Okay, wait, it's a knee jerk objection. If you don't know what a knee jerk is, I don't know if you've seen like in those like animations before, or movies or something. It's like when a doctor grabs a little hammer and like hits you on the leg with it. It's like your leg does a knee-jerk reaction. Like it does an automated response, right? It's like you hit the leg, and imagine this is like the kneecap, and this is like the actual leg. It's like imagine with a hammer you hit the kneecap, and like the leg does that, right? So then these people, these prospects, they also have something similar called a knee-jerk reaction, where sometimes just by the nature of speaking to a salesperson, and them like not feeling like it right now, they'll just give you some random bullshit reason that's not real as to get off the call with you. Those things could be like, let me just write it up here. It could be like, I'm not interested, right? Send me an email. It could be, call me back. What else is a knee-jerk objection that could happen here? You're not interested. Yeah, I mean, you get my point. It's along this it's along this side of this sort of thing. Like you have the not interested, send me an email, call me back, tell me the price. So what do you do? Like, by the way, you might be like, what do you mean tell me the price is an objection? How does that work? I'll explain it in a minute. But all these things are just smoke screens. They're not real objections. And the mistake that most appointment setters do is that they treat them as real objections and then go into like entire complicated frameworks for something that could have been avoided by just sidestepping. And so sidestepping is what we use to deal with smoke screens. And sidestepping, it has two steps to it. It has acknowledging and then redirecting. So let's say somebody, and I'm cold calling a prospect, and they say, I do my opener. Like, hey, I'll be honest with you, this is a cold call. Do you have 30 seconds? Yes, I do. Cool. Hey, what I do is XYZ. I help people get into appointment setting. So I help companies improve their appointment setting systems and their operations. Do you have time for a call? Or when are you available? Tomorrow, after tomorrow? And the prospect says, send me an email. Send me an email, then I'll let you know. So I don't want to just take that at face value, because again, like, send me an email if you don't know already. Most of the times they just tell you that to get you off the phone. Because again, people, a lot of these prospects, they kind of feel bad about just giving you a hard no on the phone and hanging up on you. And so what they'll do is, instead of telling you no, is that they'll give you these bullshit excuses to get off the call, like send me an email or call me back, only to just block you afterwards, right? So if somebody is like, yeah, send me an email, Adrian, and then I'll get you back to you, I'll say, sure, no worries, I can send you an email. And just so I know exactly what it is I can help you with in that email, what would you say right now is like the main thing holding you back at the moment? It's like, I'm acknowledging what they just told me, which is send me an email, and then I'm redirecting the conversation. And this is surprising. You might be like, oh, but if the guy wanted an email, you sidestepping that isn't going to solve the email objection. Like, they're still going to come back to it later. What I've actually found is that most times when I sidestep and I acknowledge what they say and I just redirect the conversation, they completely forget about what they just told me. Because the reality of it is that the objection, the quote-unquote objection that they had given me, was a knee-jerk. It was a knee-jerk reaction. It was never meant to be a real objection. And then once we're further along the conversation and they've admitted to me their problems and how it's been impacting them and their goals, and I've told them about my solution and how I can help them, these objections are just gone. Like the smoke screens don't even come up anymore, and they just book a meeting with me. And again, like another thing would be like, hey James, this is a cold call. Do you have 30 seconds, or do you want to hang up? So, sorry, Adrian, I'm not interested. No, James, you have no reason to be interested. Before you hang up, I want to tell you that you only pay me when I make you money, for example, right? You redirect the conversation. You don't just take what they say as face value. A good example of this, actually, I made a cold calling video on my channel not too long ago. I posted it up if you want to go check it out. I made a cold call to this guy to propose to them like setter operations. Keep in mind that call didn't turn into an appointment, but it didn't turn into an appointment because lead was unqualified, not because like the process itself was faulty. So midway through the cold call, I do my pitch. I tell the guy, hey, I help companies implement setter operations, hire setters, manage them, train them, show rate, whatever, right? All my spiel. And the guy was like, yeah, thanks, Mike. Right now at the moment, I don't really need that. I have appointment setters. I have a system in place. Maybe in the future that would be necessary. So I guess I'm not really interested at the moment. I said, yeah, no worries. Just, hey, before we end the call, typically when I speak to companies, they have 1 of 3 problems. And bro, like the conversation went from a 2-minute call to like a 10-minute call, right? It's like when you sidestep by acknowledging and redirecting the conversation, a lot of the times I just forget the initial objection. It's the same thing with price. If somebody's like, so what's the price? Or tell me what you do. Most people will just give them the answer straight up. Or most people will just like get into a long spiel of why they can't give the answer. But you know what I do? Hey, Adrian, what's the price? Yeah, that's a great question. Everything we do is custom, so I'll get back to that in a minute. And then we continue the conversation, and then they never ask me about price again. And if they do ask me about price, I just sidestep it again, and I leave it for the sales call, right? If somebody's like, tell me about what you do. Sure, look, what we do is very custom. I just want to get an idea, like I said at the beginning of the call. Remember the upfront agreement? So like I said at the beginning of the call, everything we do is custom. I just want to see exactly how we can help you, and I'll get into that in a minute. So that being said, how do you guys get your leads in a moment? Like that is another side step, right? Now, sometimes smoke screens can become real objections. Let me explain. If a smoke screen comes up once, it's probably a smoke screen, right? If somebody just says, give me the price or I'm not interested, it's a smoke screen. But if it comes twice or 3 times in the conversation, then it's more likely an objection. The way you want to think about it is a real objection. A real objection is something that can prevent the appointment from happening. Like if you think about it in sales calls, an objection is something that will prevent the sale. In appointment setting, an objection is something that will prevent the appointment. And so anything that doesn't directly prevent the appointment is a smokescreen, and anything that directly threatens or prevents the appointment is a real objection. Because again, if somebody's like, send me an email, it's not a real objection because it doesn't directly threaten or prevent the appointment. You can sidestep it. But if it comes up again a second or a third time, okay, like we can't just keep sidestepping that, because now we're starting to realize that maybe there's something a bit deeper. And keep in mind, sometimes people might say, send me an email, but then deep down, it's not that they actually want an email. It's that they just don't trust you enough because they've been scammed before. And so the goal the first things first, like in an appointment setting call, 90% of your objections are going to be smoke screens. But in the 10% chance where they do become a real objection, we want to understand the real truth behind the objection that they've given us, so that we can properly address it. So let's say, for example, somebody asked me about price once. I sidestep that. They bring it up again in the conversation twice, and I said, hey, look, like I told you at the beginning, what we do is very customized. If I were to give you a price or not, I'd be lying to you. I promise, once you speak to Tom on the call, he'll break that down for you. And then I just move on, and I sidestep again. Now imagine he comes up a third time, and he's like, Adrian, look, man, I appreciate you, I like you, whatever. All I want is just a price, and I'm not going to get on the call with anybody until I at least have a number. Then that's a real objection. So when it becomes a real objection, because it directly prevents the appointment, right, or it's threatening the appointment, we get into what I call the AIRR framework, the AIR framework. So here's how it works. We have number 1, acknowledge. Number 2, isolate. Number 3, reframe. Number 4, re-ask. And by the way, this is very commonly used in sales as well. So this is like a framework from sales calls that you can apply in appointment setting. This is a bit more advanced though. Like, to be fair, like many times you're not even going to get here. But in the case where you do get here, here's how you address it. And again, I'm not going to go too deep because this isn't really, especially when you're starting out, like you don't need to do all this, right? The AIR framework and stuff. It's just helpful to know. First thing is acknowledge. Acknowledging means just making them feel heard, right? So that would be like, makes sense, or I totally hear where you're coming from. That totally justified. I would do the same if I was in your shoes. Like any sort of statement like that makes them feel heard, because sometimes what people do is that they get straight into the reframing stuff, right? They get straight into like telling them like, oh no, you're wrong because of this and that. Like people don't want to be told that they're wrong, and they want you to agree with them. Like the way that we want to think about acknowledgement is you don't want to start off your objection handling with, let's say somebody's like, Adrian, give me the price, I'm getting off the phone with you. You don't want to be like, yeah, but if I give you the price or not, you're not going to find the value behind it. You want to say, hey, look, I see where you're coming from. I know that you need to get a price because there's a lot of scams out there, and I hear you. And for that reason, and boom, I just get into the rest of the process. Like you don't want to disagree with them. You want to agree, right? You want to make sure you agree with the prospect when you are when you're acknowledging them, making them feel heard. Nobody wants to feel like they're being sold to. Nobody wants to feel like they're not being heard or that they're being ignored. Much less, nobody wants to feel like they're dumb as well. So like you want to make sure that you validate them, even if what they just said was dumb, right? Now, step number 2 is isolating. So in the example of price, if they bring up price like 3 times, there's a reason deeper. Like the price itself is not the objection. There's something beneath the surface of the price that is a real objection. So when I ask, totally fair that you want to know the price, Jaden. And look, man, like I told you before, everything we do is very customized. I'm really curious to know though, because you've asked me about this a few times. What about it? What about like? Is it really a price thing? Is it like? Are you really wondering what the price is, or what's your real concern? And they might say, yeah, no, it's a price thing, which we could talk about how we deal with that later. But they might say, man, look, I've done this before where I pay a company like where this company tells, like, I've done it before where I go through a whole 1 hour long process with a company, and it ends up being like $10,000, and I just like, bro, if you guys are like that, I don't want to do it at all. Interesting. Why is that? Well, because I've paid a lot of money before to other companies, and every time I've tried that, it just never worked out, man. Like I'm not looking to spend the thousands and thousands of dollars. So that just, I mean, that's why, man. So now he's giving me the real reason. Now we have the root cause, the root, right, behind the objection. And now when we have the root cause, that's when we can get into reframing. Because again, what most salespeople do is somebody's like, Adrian, just give me the price, and they'll be like, yeah, no, but look, I can't give you the price right now because if I give you the price, you don't see the value behind it. And it's like, imagine you're comparing cars without the features. I was like, how do you know which car is more better? It's like they just get straight into a reframe, which is what creates a lot of the sales resistance in this stage, right? So again, when you're isolating, you want to find the root cause that, if solved, would then allow you to book the appointment. Because we want to isolate and find the real objection is what I'm trying to get out of it. Like, you want to find really what's underneath everything they've said. In the example where somebody's like, send me an email, and it comes up multiple times, like, Adrian, I told you, send me an email, I'm not going to book with you. I'd be like, hey, sure, no worries. And look, what I'm really curious to know is, because in that meeting, Brian's going to tell you exactly how everything works in detail. Like, what is it about an email that you would prefer over like speaking to somebody? And they might say, well, look, I just don't want to waste my time, man. Well, what makes you think it's a waste of time based on the conversation that we had? Well, dude, I tried companies like that before, where they X, Y, X, Y, Z, blah, 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 blah. And then I can get into the reframe. So then after isolate, I want to get into reframing. And reframing this is where the actual challenging of the belief and where the sales spiel comes in. And the thing about reframing is the best way to explain reframing is through analogies. So let me give an analogy right now. Imagine you're at the gym with your bro, and your friend is like, bro, my muscles hurt a lot. Like, I don't think I can keep doing this, man. I just can't. I don't like weightlifting. My muscles hurt. Okay, you want to acknowledge, you want to isolate that. Okay, maybe in this case you don't really isolate that much because like you already have the belief, which is like pain in the gym equals bad, right? Now in this case, I want to reframe. The reframe would be something like, hey, let me ask you something. How do you think muscle is built? Well, when the tissue gets broken down and you get protein, it grows back stronger. Okay. So then this pain that you feel right now, don't you think that's the process that you just described of the tissue being broken down? Well, yeah, but hear me out. Like, what you're seeing right now, the way that you're looking at it is working out equals painful, and pain equals bad because whatever reason, right? But in reality, you just told me like, hey, for you to build muscle, you need to break the muscle down in order for the protein to then like build up the muscle again, and it comes back stronger. So then, like this pain that you're feeling right now, why are you choosing to see that as a bad thing when in reality it's exactly the thing that's building up the muscle? And so like, yeah, I just didn't really think about it that way. I just didn't really think about it that way. Cool. And then we get into the re-ask, which is like, so that being said, let's get back into it. Let's keep hitting that set. Get the fucking setup. Let's hit that fucking 100 kg bench press. Like whatever. Re-ask is basically redirecting the conversation back to where it was before. So if I ask somebody like, hey, what time can you do, tomorrow or after tomorrow? And I'm like, yeah, Adrian, give me a price. I go through the entire process. I acknowledge, isolate, reframe. Once I do everything, instead of just staying quiet, so imagine I drop the reframe and I just stay quiet. Instead of doing that, I just want to direct the conversation back. So yeah, would you be opposed to doing something tomorrow or the day after tomorrow? Like, best case scenario, you find out, you walk away with a lot of value. Worst case, nothing changes. You just lost some time. That would be an example of re-ask. That was a bit longer, but you just want to ask the same question that brought up the objection previously, or you want to re-ask whatever that step was that you were stuck on. Another example of reframing, per se, would be, imagine I speak to a contractor and that contractor has tried 10 different things in the past that didn't work out for him. So if he's like, yeah, Adrian, I don't want to get on the meeting yet because I've worked with other companies before who are like you guys, who also called me and they were also on ads and I got scammed because of that. Okay, no worries. That totally makes sense, man. Like, imagine this is isolation now, and I just got to the isolation. Now I'm getting into a reframe. So yeah, I mean, Juan, like, when you told me that when you tried Facebook ads before, you were doing it with a company that made you pay per month, regardless of the lead quality. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. Now, like I explained to you, we're only getting paid when you get on with a lead who is qualified, meaning they have the money for it, they're looking for it within 90 days, and all decision makers are present. So, can you see how that's different? He's like, yeah, man, but like, look, I'm not saying like you guys are not different. Maybe you guys are legit, but it's like I've already paid money before and it didn't work for me, so like, I don't want to try it again. Cool. Carlos, let me ask you something, Juan. If you go to the supermarket and you buy milk, and let's say you drink that milk, and it turns out that milk was spoiled, so it doesn't end up feeling too well with you, does that mean that you stop buying milk for your rest of your life because all milk is bad just because one of them was spoiled. Of course not. I wouldn't do that. You're right, but like that's exactly what you're doing here. You're basically saying I tried one thing, that thing didn't work for me, aka it was spoiled. So I'm just gonna judge everything else the same way. I'm just gonna say nothing else works. Do you really think that the competitors that you told me about who are making 50,000 and 50 million a year, do you really think that they're not doing this right now? Like, do you really think that they're just telling themselves, yeah, this doesn't work, so I tried the one company, it didn't work, so I'm not gonna try anything else? Well, no, right? And so that stage you're at, where you're doing $1 million a year, for you to get to 50 million a year, like if these companies are doing 50 million a year, are making it work with this, like, would you agree with me that maybe it wasn't so much the idea of trying something new, but maybe it was more so who you did it with? Well, yeah, perhaps you're right. Cool. So then that being said, would you be opposed to get on a 30-minute call so we can show you how this is going to be different from what you tried before? Like that right there is another analogy of a reframe and a re-ask. Now, like I said, like very, very unlikely that you get to this stage of this in a setting call, especially when you're starting out. Like this is more of an advanced kind of thing. But yeah, that's pretty much it for handling real objections. The final kind of quote-unquote objections that we have are logistical concerns. Now, the reason why I didn't really include this as part of the percentages is because logistical concerns are overcome through logic and common sense. They're not real objections. For example, somebody says you propose booking an appointment, and they say, yeah, I'm down to book an appointment. I just have to talk to my wife to find out what time works for her. In that case, it's not a real objection. You're not going to sidestep that. You're also going to treat it like a real objection, even though it technically or theoretically proposes a risk to the appointment. You would just say something like, okay, no worries about it. Well, here's what we can do. We can set up a tentative time, and I can call you back. Let's say, do you think you would have spoken to your wife by end of day? Yeah, cool. So then I'll call you back end of day, and then we'll confirm if that time works. Worst case, we'll reschedule. Sound cool? Cool. So now you just found a workaround. It's like it wasn't a real objection. It didn't have to do all the objection handling stuff. It was a very logistical, it's kind of common sense thing, Another one would be like, Adrian, I don't have a computer. No worries. Are you gonna be in the office at Tuesday 5 p.m.? Yes. Cool. Then I'll just send you the link on your phone. You can just join from your phone. Cool. Fair enough. What's another one? Yeah, Tuesday 5 p.m. doesn't work for me. All good. Want to do 6 p.m.? Again, like these are very sort of logistical things that you can overcome with common sense. So I'm not going to go too deep into that further from this point. So that's pretty much everything at this point. The last thing that I'm missing here is tracking. I'm not going to go too deep into this, but basically when you're doing all your calls and you're doing appointment setting, you always want to track your numbers for many different reasons. It helps you for when you're applying for future jobs. It helps you understand your level of skill. Basically, there's a lot of benefits, and you should always track numbers. Like you can't improve what you don't track. You want to make sure you're tracking inbound and outbound separately, because each one is going to give you very different data, and you can't judge your inbound data and compare that to your outbound data. Like, of course, inbound is going to convert a lot higher, but that doesn't mean that outbound is inherently bad or that you're doing it bad. It's just that compared to inbound, these numbers look a lot worse, right? So just a quick discrepancy. Now, the main numbers that you want to track when you're doing this is, number one, the number of dials/DMs that you do per day, right? Self-explanatory. Next, you want to track how many of those dials or DMs that you send actually pick up or respond to you. After that, you want to track how many meaningful conversations you have. And meaningful convos, by the way, this could mean how many people you pitched, how many discoveries you did. Maybe those things could also be separate. Some people even say like pitch rate, pitch percentage, pitch percent. Dude, I can't fucking draw today. So what this might mean is, like, from every pickup that you had, how many of those pickups turn into a meaningful conversation? And you or the company that you work with can define what a meaningful conversation is. But in most cases, a meaningful conversation is a conversation that goes on from just like the opener. So the opener, like, let's say you cold call somebody, that's a pickup. You give them your pitch and they hang up on you. That's not a meaningful convo. But you give them the pitch and then they are engaging with you and you're getting into discovery. That would count as a meaningful conversation. That's like from how many pickups did it take you to have like an actual conversation with somebody. And then, of course, like you or your company would define that specifically. After that, you get into the dial / pickup to set rate. So then you want to track, okay, so from 100 dials, how many sets do I get? From 100 DMs, how many appointments am I getting? And the other thing you want to track is from how many pickups, let's say from 100 pickups, how many appointments am I getting? Right? This tells you, like, overall, it helps you assess your level of skill. Like, of course, dials and DMs shows you how much volume you're doing, so you can see if you're lacking that. But then if you have a really bad pickup rate to meaningful conversation rate, it might tell you that there's something wrong with your pitch. If you have a really bad pickup rate to set rate, it could either be because of your pitch or maybe whatever you're doing after the pitch is really bad. right? So being able to track all these numbers at different stages allows you to find the main constraint that you can work on to improve on your skill set. Now, the next one from here is the show rate, meaning from the people that you book, how many of them show up. So let's say you book 10 appointments and you only get 2 people showing up. Then you know for sure that you're doing something wrong, most likely either at the stage of booking the meeting and the next steps, so setting up the expectations, you're either doing a bad job there, or maybe you're not triaging people properly. Maybe you're not building enough urgency to get them to show up, right? So the show rate speaks a lot about your setting process, and it can tell you a lot about more than you think, actually, because you think that people don't show up just because something came up or because they had to reschedule or it was a bad time. Wrong. Many times people who don't show up, they don't show up because they lost interest or they just didn't see a reason to show up, which is why as an appointment setter, your success isn't just determined by how many appointments you can get, but how many of them can show up, and indirectly how many can close. Because sure, like you can't directly impact the close rate, but inevitably, if you have a great triage with the prospect, naturally the closer is going to have more context on the lead, and the lead's going to have a much more positive experience, which means that they're more likely to sell or to close. So the next thing you're going to track is close rate. Now, this is, again, close rate is not fully controlled by you. This is mostly controlled by the closer or the salesperson. But then you still want to have a good idea of how, what percentage of your leads close, because you'll definitely have scenarios where one setter has like 50% close rate and another setter has like 20% closure on their leads. And that discrepancy tells you a lot about, again, maybe what could be going on in the triage, what the conversation looks like, etc. So that was pretty much the comprehensive guide to appointment setting. This is everything you need to know to go from zero to hero, or even if you already have some information, to actually land a job and to be qualified enough to actually do this and make a few thousand a month with it. The question is, are you going to apply and are you actually going to do this, right? Now, of course, like I said before, I'm going to have a different module on actually reaching out to offers and getting offers and being the best on the team and how to maximize your offer. And you might be wondering, well, Adrian, why are you giving all this away for free? Well, if you charge people to work with them on this exact thing. And the reason I do this is because, first off, I know that like some people just they can't afford to work with me, and that's totally fine. So I want to have this resource for those kinds of people who they want to do this but they don't have the means to do this, so that later on once they do get results from this, they'll have the money to work with me, right? So in a way there's a selfish reason behind it, but at the same time, like, it's a good thing for you because you know that I'm trying to help you and not just doing this with the intention of not getting your result. Again, because I know if you get results with this, you're going to want to buy from me later. So just being super transparent with that. And another thing as well is, like, even though you can do this whole thing yourself, when people work with me, I help them get to the outcome a lot faster, right? And I help them focus on their specific issues and I help customize it to them. So what that means is that they typically end up getting a job faster and they end up making money with this faster, and they end up making more as opposed to somebody that like tries to do it themselves, generally speaking, right? Like, of course, there's exceptions here and there. So that's the main reasoning. But that being said, I really hope that you found this valuable. Again, if you want to go check out my Instagram, you can go do that. You can kind of see some other posts of mine, some testimonials, whatever. If you want to book a call with me as well, there's a link down in the description. You can go through that as well. That being said, I hope you found this valuable, and I'll be seeing you soon. Have a good one.